No, I guess we need to call the meeting to order. It is 6:30 p.m. Are you ready for us to start? You are. Okay, perfect. We are the Infrastructure Committee for Tuesday, October 22nd, opening at 6:30 p.m. And we will begin our kickoff with an acknowledgement with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territories of Lekwungen speaking people with whom we're honored to have the ability to build working relationships with the people of Songhees and Wisepsum First Nations. And to that end, we recently signed our communication protocol to help us to work better with our First Nations. And I'm excited about that. And so I'm looking to approve our agenda. And with that, I would also like to seek the committee's permission to schedule a second meeting and to just deal with 5.1 tonight and deal with 5.2 at a later date that we will determine. Stuart? Oh, hang on. I'm concerned that just a minute, I can't get her going. Oh, there we go.
I'm concerned the sustainable infrastructure stuff seems to have fallen off the table. It was, we talked about it in May, said to basically the council, we want to talk about it some more, and it's not here. We're talking about scheduling maybe more meetings for the transportation stuff. But to my mind, the sustainable infrastructure is bigger and more important, and I don't see it. I wonder if we have a schedule for how that's going to move forward or what we're doing about that.
Okay, let's, can we add that as a discussion item after 5.1?
That's your wish.
Yeah. That way we cannot get kind of all over the place and stick to. So we'll do 5.2 as a discussion on sustainable. And we will abbreviate the agenda tonight and bring back the transportation master plan to a future time, which we will also arrange. I'm just thinking Ashley isn't here tonight, but most people are here. So we'll have a discussion on the dates with staff. Also make that 5.3 date for TMP. With those amendments, could I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Dawn. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up, we have one set of minutes to approve from June 11th. Long time ago, but I had a look at them. Anyone notice anything that needed to be amended? Not seeing any. Stuart, were you moving that? Moved by Stuart Parkinson. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, we are on to the meat and potatoes of the meeting, which is the 5.1, the traffic model update.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make some quick adjustments to the little speech I have here. Tonight we have one presentation for you as 5.2 was moved. This is related to the traffic model, Colwis traffic model. And the other one was related to the transportation master plan update. The traffic model is plays an important role in forecasting the future traffic volumes and helping us make informed decisions on the road improvements, capacity planning, and how we can best accommodate the city's growth into the future. It also complements the transportation master plan that is being updated. I'll cross the second piece out about the transportation master plan. So as you know, the city's consultant, Urban Systems, is updating the plan with us, and Dan Casey is here tonight to speak with you about the model and what it means for the future of Galway's transportation network. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dan so he can take you through the presentation and answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Josh. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to this discussion and sort of working with you all on these conversations and tough questions about the city's traffic model. So I wanted to speak tonight about first a little bit about the model. So what it is, what it isn't, how it was built. I wanted to then talk about some of the scenarios that were tested through the modeling exercise, and then talk about some of the outputs. What does it all mean? So to start with a bit about the model. So the model, Josh touched on some of this too off the top, but the model is intended to support long-range road network planning. So we talk about a TMP update at a future date. The road network component of that TMP is intended to be informed by the work that's being done through the model here. So a direct relationship there. Beyond that, it identifies location and timeframes for investment in street infrastructure, whether that's corridor upgrades and or intersection improvements. It's a tool to not only identify the locations, but also the approximate timing of when to expect those investments to need to be made. And then beyond simply the city's own planning, it's also intended as a tool to support testing and understanding of the impact that future development might have on the city's street network. So by establishing the model that we're doing right now, I'll get into it, but it represents a current case today. It also represents a future scenario. And as new development applications come along, they can be tested against the current and against the projected future to determine what the impacts of that might be. So a very valuable tool in that respect as well. And then lastly, wanted to identify also that the intent is that the model's been developed over the last year plus, but it is meant to be updated over time too, to make sure that it continues to reflect current conditions as they're occurring in the future. So what the model does, it's based on the city's land use, both existing and future. So we'll talk to some of the future scenarios that have been developed. They're being developed to reflect anticipated land use in future. So I did mention a second ago that the intent is the existing condition will continually be updated over time. The goal is that it sort of builds and we watch it progress towards some of these future scenarios that have been projected. What it does is it's rather than calculating traffic, it's actually estimating travel demand. And so I'll show in a second, but it's really based around total trip making and trip patterns rather than strictly traffic volumes. And then what it does is it assigns future trips between a series of identified zones. Again, I'll show a map in a second, but it's sort of projecting out travel demand between these zones. What it doesn't do, it's not intended to test specifically corridor or intersection performance. Additional study is needed to use the outputs, so the exports from the macro model, from the citywide model, to then be applied at a more micro scale at the intersection level to test out exact intersection performance. And so that's a key distinction here is the demand model really is around movement and patterns. Okay, so the map on the right, the model's set up to include 22 zones within Colwood, plus I think it's 8 external zones. And so we populate each of the 22 zones with existing land use. That's residential units and commercial or industrial or institutional floor space. And that makes up kind of the current land use scenario. And then we're also able to attribute the internal external trip making beyond the city's boundaries into 8 external zones. You sort of work around the city, and it's Machosen in the south, Langford to the west, and View Royal and beyond, sort of to the north and to the east. And so traffic in and out via those kind of gateways have been accounted for as well. Importantly, a key parameter is the modeling work represents the AM peak period. So it's the busiest hour of the day, and it's in the morning. And so that represents, generally speaking, sort of a outward flow of traffic out of the city as people sort of go to school or work or whatnot for the day. And then the PM would account for that flush coming back. But this is based around AM conditions.
Can I just ask you to explain to the committee how you chose 22 zones in Colwood? Because they don't seem especially intuitive to me for a lot of it. They're not neighborhoods that we would traditionally recognize.
Yeah, it's a good comment, good question. You'll notice they're generally divided by, not exclusively, but by major roads. So divided by VMP or Souk or Machosen or Latoria. So the thinking being that those are key on and off points for the land use. Again, it's really about the land use rather than the traffic, but the trips originate in those zones and then make their way onto the major street network and through based on that. Versus if they were, say, bisected by VNP or Machosen or whatnot, we would have to make guesstimates as to which are utilizing that major road, which is versus those that might be moving outward to use another major road.
So driven more by geography than by access to a particular route.
More so by how we anticipate they'll get on and off major routes. Yeah, and how we want to be able to account for that as best we can. Yeah.
Okay. And the other question that I had, and if others have questions, please do let me know, but was just in terms of when we were looking at the data, we're looking at where people are going now, based on, I guess, Google data, universally available data from somewhere out there in the crazy world. But we haven't looked at specifically employment centers. We're looking at where people live and we're looking at where they drive to now, but we're not correlating any points, destinations of desire, right? Which I would think of as, hospitals, schools, large employment centers. Schools being one of our biggest employment drivers. Probably hospitals might be the next closest layer, I'm guessing. But those would be informative to our process because that would give us an idea of where is it the most important to have equity of access. Is that something that's possible to do? Has it been done or contemplated?
Yeah, these are great questions. So schools should be accounted for. They're part of the, it's generally commercial, but it's also institutional floor area also. So they're accounted for in both the land use quantities that make up the trip generation, as well as any current traffic counts that we've used to calibrate the model. That's sort of a next step I was going to explain, but is we populate the model, we run the model, and see what it's saying in terms of volumes and trips up and down major corridors. And then we went out and counted those corridors to make sure that the volumes the model was projecting reflects what's actually happening on the ground. And we did a little bit of calibration around that. So those items should be accounted for. In terms of like hospital you mentioned. In terms of hospital or maybe the Dockyard D&D is a big generator downtown, UVic, the locations like that are external to the city. The traffic associated with those uses is reflected in the external zones, the coming and going of traffic in and out of the city. So not within the 22 within, but the ones that originate or are destined for outside the city. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it possible to, I guess, slice and dice our data to look at how it's working for hospitals, major destinations?
Like hospitals specifically?
This is just the one that comes to mind as something that we all have to go to, other than schools. I mean, some people go to school, some people don't, but major employers in our area was where I was coming from. And Dockyard, of course, is one. The hospital is another, the schools are probably our third largest employer. But I was thinking in terms of trying to prioritize improvements to routes that have the greatest needs for the most number of people.
Yeah. Yes, the short answer, yes. I think that's probably a process that happens. Like the model doesn't really instill prioritization or bias. Bias is the wrong word, but suggesting that certain destinations are the most important ones and others are the second most important. A trip is sort of a trip for the sake of this. I would suggest that using the outputs of a model like this, then prioritization exercises could be undertaken to say this corridor is a priority over that one because it leads to a major employment generator or destination. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Roger.
Dan, how are your algorithms factored into unforeseen circumstances? In other words, there's a major accident on one street and all the traffic dumps onto another street. And then, so how do you do that? And how good are your algorithms?
Those are two separate questions.
Yes.
How good are our algorithms? Question number two. Pretty good. They're, I mean, it's a consistent and sort of industry standard approach we've taken here that other communities have also used. It is predictive in a, I'll get back to your question number one, but it is predictive of a typical case or condition. It's quite strong on that. I'd say to your first question around a crash or like an emergency event of some sort, that is not, so there's a way to model that. If this corridor were capacity was reduced in half, or if it were shut down altogether, what's the load on the rest of the network? There is a way to do that. To date, we haven't done that, but that can be done.
Reason I ask is when they were doing the Mackenzie interchange, I asked specifically, I went to all 5 presentations and asked the company, the engineers, about making Burnside and Wilkins, or pardon me, Mackenzie and under overpass. And they told me unequivocally, their modeling showed that would not be a problem there. 2 months ago, I was coming home on the Pat Bay Highway and I couldn't even turn onto the off ramp for Mackenzie. Traffic was backed up from the Island Highway to the Pat Bay Highway, bumper to bumper, something they assured us would never happen. So I worry about modeling if it doesn't factor in everything. We can keep it simple, but it doesn't solve the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would like to see sort of built into this, those extenuating circumstances where these things happen on a daily basis.
Yeah, that work could be done. Yeah, there's a way. Yeah.
Excellent. And how does that work? Because there was the disclaimer in your presentation that the traffic model doesn't do intersection performance or corridor performance. And that kind of threw me because that's kind of what I was wanting the model to tell us.
Mhm.
Is about how the corridors perform. So, if we constrain one side, does that, block up the other? Or because we kind of know intuitively that traffic is like water and finds a way.
That's right.
And I'm just looking to try to understand what our constraints are and what we need to ask to get to the issues that we feel are important.
Yeah, it's a very good comment. So it is essentially a 2-part process where the model gives us travel demand and demand patterns. And then step 2 is take those outputs. It'll project it for the major streets. It doesn't do every street. It doesn't do all the little locals. It deals in the major streets only. And then we take those outputs and then we assign them the corridor and intersection level and run essentially a separate analysis to test exactly what you're getting at, which is intersection performance levels. What's the level of service? How long are the queues? How long are people delayed through that location? So it's a two-step process. Yeah. And then maybe if I could just add to that, I sort of had three parts to the slide deck. The first one was sort of what we're doing now, setting the stage. The second one was some scenarios that have been developed around what future development and land use would be. And then the third was applying those outputs in a modeling sense to understand how the network might perform. Yeah. 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 And I'd also say too, on that part two, the options to test performance are kind of endless. We can do it under different land use scenarios. We can do it under different network scenarios with partial closures or capacity reductions on certain corridors. There's all sorts of things that could be done. Yeah.
I'll let you carry on.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so I think just kind of keep the zones and both the internal and the external zones in mind. A couple other pieces of information that the model is founded on. On the left is a map of existing laning. That's pretty straightforward. I mentioned major streets only, so arterials and collectors. This doesn't deal in locals. Inherent in that is a little bit of noise. When we talk about the volumes that are carried on arterials and collectors, it's 10 or 20 times typically what's on the locals. So a little bit of that gets absorbed elsewhere, but generally the majors are what we care about. And then I mentioned briefly too that there was a calibration exercise. So we populate the model with land use. Whether it's residential or whether it's commercial institutional, there's an anticipated number of trips that comes with every single home or every 100 square feet of commercial floor area. Let the model do its thing, and it'll tell us where the demand for each of those trips is to and from. But then we calibrate. So we went in field, did a number of traffic counts. This was going back in 2022, I think. It might have been early 2023. And we test what the model is saying volumes will be on the major roads. We test that against what the counts actually say they are. And so we're able to sort of update and massage and calibrate the model to make sure that it is reflecting what's happening today. And that's our starting point. And then from that, we can jump off and start testing future scenarios. Okay. So I'll talk through a few of the scenarios that have been tested. There's a fair bit here. So we started this off. This is going back a year plus. We sort of tested three scenarios. One was I think we called it scenario 0. It's the existing condition. So that was this initial modeling with the calibration applied. Scenario 1 was a future growth scenario that represents 2041, which is the scenario that's included in the 2018 OCP. And then a second scenario, which is we called full build out, which accounts for the full build out of the known land use that's being proposed in South Colwood, so the Beachlands, Royal Bay, Olympic View, etc. And so we're able to project out future land use to reflect both that scenario 1, scenario 2. It's kind of a lot of numbers here, but just to give you a sense of the land use that's included in each of those, the scenario 1 and the scenario 2. It's essentially a doubling of residential population in scenario 2, a fairly significant increase in commercial and institutional floor area as well. So along with the land use scenarios are some assumptions around how the street network is built out over time. We largely followed the pre-existing transportation master plan and OCP road network assumptions or planned connections. So the map on the screen in front of us showing current case on the left, scenario 1, the 2041 OCP growth in the center. And then rather than show the map, I've actually just listed out a number of the sub scenarios that were tested for scenario 2. And really, right, this was the emphasis for the operational analysis that was done, is test out the benefit, disbenefit of each of these sub scenarios for the full build out condition against one another to determine how they perform.
And we have a question from Stuart Parkinson.
Oh, sorry, I got a number of questions, but just a few that I think I want to make sure I'm clearly understanding what you're presenting. Could you back up a few slides to about the model?
Yeah.
There. So if I read that right-hand map, my right-hand map, it tells me existing conditions are all flowing at green, which I presume means they're all good? Is that what I should infer from the green lines?
It's a good question. I'm glad you asked the question. We're basically thicker the line, the higher the volumes. So we're seeing some of the thickest lines on Sucro and
So it's
BNP.
not related to percentage of capacity or anything like that.
Green does not mean go in this case.
Yeah, all right, that's interesting, thank you. And then sliding forward, I just, OCP growth, scenario 1, 2041 population, scenario 2, full build out. Okay, so that's, how long do we think for scenario 2? Is that?
So that's a really good question that's come up at a few points around the council table and in various discussions. It's based on the land use, not a horizon year. And we've been asked, well, then how do we know when certain improvements are going to be triggered? And so we're guessing that we've used sort of a 2060, 2070 type timeframe for that full build out. But really that scenario is a land use based scenario, not a time frame based scenario.
So scenario 1, if everything that's in the current OCP was built, that would be scenario 1.
Yep.
And if some maximum build out, everything that could be developed was developed, that would be scenario 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not quite, sorry. That scenario 1 is the growth that staff expect to achieve by 2041.
So my understanding was there was an independent study by Colliers on the development potential and likelihood associated with the land use that have been included in the OCP, the 2018 OCP.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the Colliers study numbers for the scenario 0 is the very first one. Scenario 1 is with the Colliers growth included, and scenario 2 is with everything that we have currently in the OCP approved.
I believe it's beyond the OCP though. It's everything that's sort of being actively planned for in South Colwood, which takes in more than what's explicitly. So I think the Colliers work was sort of a anticipated absorption, essentially, like what can we anticipate versus which isn't everything the OCP says built out. It's sort of and I don't entirely know what's behind it, but it's some analysis of what to expect within the OCP timeframe versus scenario 2 it's almost like timeframe irrelevant. It's if the whole thing were built.
But based on current zoning or based on if more stuff gets rezoned?
Based on what's been accounted for in OCP plus what we know from the last couple of years to be coming with some of the major applications in South Colwood.
Oh, okay. And then if we could move up to I think I now understand. Well, let me ask again on model scenarios, the maps. Again, on the one on the right-hand side, scenario 1 OCP growth, which I would understand to mean whatever is zoned today is the growth, which I guess would be scenario 1 again. You're showing the roads again are blue everywhere. Does that mean 2-lane roads work up to OCP growth?
For the purpose of running the scenario 1 demand model, yes. And then the iteration is the model is taken into step 2, like I talked about, and we understand the intersection performance. And that's where we start to learn, we need to widen this corridor, we need to upgrade that intersection. But for the sake of assigning the trips to the network and allowing the model to project demand patterns, it's a status quo road network, with the exception of the Allendale connections that have been previously contemplated in OCP and TMP.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, up to the OCP growth projections, tweaking intersections and adding some turn lanes here and there, the 2-lane roads or the roads as they exist today are going to handle the traffic within the acceptable parameters?
No, this is the jumping off point then to test. I think exactly what you're getting at is, where does that added capacity need to go? So this scenario, we don't know yet, right? We developed the scenario on the assumption that the network is what it is, no new major connections with the exceptions of those that have been identified, and the demand patterns are run accordingly. And so when we take those outputs, the demand patterns, and apply them at an intersection level, which is sort of the step 2 in all of this, that's when we start to learn, holy cow, this intersection's overloaded, that corridor's needs to be widened.
So it's intersections that drive the number of lanes, not the volume of traffic?
Volume of traffic is like a proxy, but really it's what's happening at the intersection. That question comes up a lot, is this corridor overloaded? The congestion doesn't happen on the corridor. The congestion happens at the intersection. So it really is a product of what's happening at the intersection. But we can make inferences and best guesses based on volumes relative to number of travel lanes.
So we could spend a whole bunch of money on intersections and not worry about how many lanes lead up to them?
You'll find out through those intersection works where the added lanes are needed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and just before I go, we have a couple more questions. I just wanted to clarify, because we started this discussion with the traffic model doesn't do intersection performance, and yet we're again talking about intersection performance. So I'm finding that difficult to is that because the intersection performance requires more steps than just having a model? Or is that something else?
It's 2 slides ahead.
Okay.
3. I lied.
All right. I'll let Roger ask his question next.
And I can understand, and I realize you have to start somewhere when you're looking at different zoning and build out. But one thing you're not counting are the cars. Now, I understand Colwood owned ICBC and said, how many cars do we have registered in Colwood? Or how many insured, and divided it by the number and said, okay, it's 1 point something per car or per household. Drive up Benholm or any of the side streets at night and count the cars. There's 3 or 4 cars in many cases at one house. So I think that number is really out of whack. And I think when you're looking at modeling like this, you have to know the amount of vehicles you're dealing with in a loaded area, and then work from there. Doors are telling you nothing. That one door could have 5 kids, and each of them could have a car. And they're not parking on the property, they're parking on the streets or down the lane. In my case, some of people are parking on another street. So until we know how many vehicles we're dealing with, we really can't do this. So I think we've got to look at not only the build out parking spots, but actually the number of cars. I look at one house, it's a 4-plex, 11 cars are there. So that's well in excess of 2 per door. And I think our estimates on cars per household in Colwood are way off.
Can you phrase that as a question?
Our numbers in Colwood regarding vehicles off.
I mean, I can share the origin of that. Well, the ICBC figure you're referencing, it's out there, it's publicly available. It assigns registered vehicles to addresses. Presumably the bulk of the cars on the road are registered. Which houses they're registered to, we're not down at that level, but I wouldn't have a ton of reason to think that aggregate figure for the city is, unless we've got a number of uninsured vehicles on the road, it should be doing a good job of that. I think regardless, the traffic figures that are the traffic numbers that are behind the model aren't registered vehicles. They're observed. They're based on traffic counts. So a number of vehicles over a defined location, typically over a period of 24 hours or sometimes longer. So it is a different data source than the ICBC registered vehicle numbers. So I think we can take a bit of comfort if there's some sort of concern that those registered vehicle counts are inaccurate, that the model itself is actually founded on observed counts rather than the insured vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also, we got to be careful to stick to, we're trying to figure out the transportation system, not the parking system at this time anyways. So we'll go over to Taylor.
Thanks. I'm just wondering if maybe you can step back to the beginning of the presentation maybe, and what do you need from us out of this presentation? Because it seems like what we're touching on or what we're getting at is that second stage micro simulation, which comes from probably picking one of these scenarios, is the data that we ultimately are most interested in. So is that what we're getting at? You want us to be able to settle on a scenario to go to that next stage with?
Yeah, that awesome question. I guess I didn't have any very. Do you have specific questions?
No, I have an answer to this one.
Sure.
Thank you. I think tonight we were starting with a plan that we wanted to inform the committee on what we are going to do with the transportation master plan and how the traffic model works in that process. That engagement process is going to meet with the public, various entities, including the committee. So we wanted to give the committee robust information compared to most of the stakeholders that they're going to get. They're going to get a touch of it. We wanted to give you guys a little in-depth information so that when you're part of that stakeholder process, you could have an informed opinion based on the in-depth information you received tonight. And then after that stakeholder process, that would include various committees, entities like the ministry and all of those other places and the public. When we gathered all of that information and all that input, we would then bring it back to the committee to ask for a decision with regards to what would you recommend council proceed with, and give you the reasons where we may end up making a decision or not making a decision based on all the input from all the stakeholders, and then get a recommendation from you that you would send to council. So that was the intent of tonight. Now, I think based on the questions, the intent is to try to help you gain more understanding of what the model is, how it works, and hopefully give you assurance that it's as accurate as you can get when you're basing it on. I mean, if we had millions of dollars, we could count every street. We could do calibration on every road every week for a year and get it down so it would be almost perfect. But we don't have millions of dollars. We're doing it with tens of thousands of dollars we're trying to do it with. And it'll probably end up, into 100,000 or so. So we are limited with regards to funding and outcome, but we believe it's adequate enough to give us a realistic picture. And it's ongoing. It's a living model, so that when we first make decisions, what's great about it is when we do, for instance, the Carindale intersection at VMP next year, and we put a traffic light in, we'll be able to input that piece of information and that infrastructure and see what it does to our traffic, and then maybe pivot from a project that we thought we were going to do in 27 or 28 and maybe push one up from 30 and move it in because that traffic changed. So when Dan talks about the corridor, think of it like a pipe where you've got a water flowing through that pipe. And when you come to an intersection, you turn a valve and the valve slows down that water. That water's still trying to get through, but it's slowing down and that valve got in the way. That's what an intersection does. If it wasn't for all the intersections, everything would just fly through. The corridors wouldn't be restricted at all. We have to figure out what those restrictions do. How do we lessen the impacts of those restrictions? So that's what we're trying to do with the model. So that's what we're trying to get tonight. But like I say, tonight we're hoping to provide clarity for you with regards to the answer. I'm extremely thankful Dan's here.
Okay, next we have Kim.
Thank you, John, for that explanation. I just respectfully, I just feel that tonight's meeting should have been a workshop and not us all sitting here looking at words on a document. And if you have a simulation, let's show it, like show it to this committee. That's what they're here to see and to understand better. And I don't think that this is, I just think that we could have used this time better to see the simulation and to involve the committee in that. And so they can understand the basis for these assumptions, I guess. And so that's all I wanted to say. I just think that we need to do this better. Like I feel like I'm asking myself, why are we here tonight? What is the outcome of this? Like we're learning some information from here, but based on what? And so, sorry.
And next we have Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. When I was reading through this originally, I understood that the traffic model would be submitting in and being influenced by the long-term plan, as the transportation plan, as well as influencing the transportation plan. When I was reading through that, I came up with a few questions that maybe as we're going through this, it would help me understand how these modeling scenarios were looking at some of the longer term assumptions that have been put into the transportation model, along with the development plan that's within Colwood. Some of these would come in. There's a significant set of goals within the long-term transportation plan to be multimodal, and doesn't really reflect in some of these, not easily anyways, not from what was provided, but has all of that long-term set of goals and plans been put into this model, which was to help reflect some of the requirements on transportation in the future. I'm thinking of, is there ever going to be a train or some sort of a rail transit out here to get to other destinations? You know, Colwood is not a large enough community to really employ a lot of its constituents, so it's a bit of a we travel out. A lot of us travel out for work, so that there's always going to be that travel component in this area. Some of the other ones as well is some of the things that have changed here recently, which I'm pretty sure probably aren't going to be in there, but something like the 250 hectares of Royal Roads University that are currently Royal Roads University. As it comes through the treaty reconciliation, what will that look like in the future? And if you have an idea, I'd love to hear it. But I suspect that's going to have a considerable impact on the land use of this area in the future, depending on how that all gets reconciliation goes through. And also some of the timelines. I know we've been talking about the original OCP being for notionally 2041, so 20 years out when it was put together, 25 years out. Has there been any consideration for increased growth or increased speed of that growth? Because I see quite a bit more development out here than maybe was part of that original plan. So how would that influence this model, which would then of course influence the transportation plan? And just one other quick question. When you look at the map, there's really 4 modes, major corridors in this city that go within the city or out of the city. You have Veterans Memorial, Metchosin, Souk obviously as being the main corridor, and then Wishart as well. Wishart being of course a smaller road, but it is fairly considerable through there. And you have down through Lagoon. Was there any consideration in any of these scenarios around the Wishart Road itself, any expansion on that portion of those as part of the modeling. And then my last one, of course, is to what I think everybody else has been saying as well, is if we free up the traffic on this end, what are the considerations for the rest of the major corridor going out? You've got Veteran Memorial going through Langford, and then you have Souk Road, which is already constrained during that peak period, way over capacity now. Is there future consideration on that as part of your longer term plan that would be influenced by some of this modeling? Thank you.
So I count 5 questions in there, I think. Happy to work through those. Okay, your first question was around, does the model account for like the city's modal shift objectives, more people walking, cycling, on transit? It's a really good point. It does not. So in a way, it pre-predicts a kind of a static demand pattern. So if anything, and the scenario opportunities are endless, but the rate at which future land use generates trips could be factored down to reflect that. So the results to date are, treat them conservatively. They represent sort of patterns of today. Yeah. Your second question was around what if Railroads University doesn't look in future like it does today? We did not model a scenario where Railroads looks meaningfully different. Again, it could be. I think we would need to understand what that might be, what that redevelopment could look like. But of course, that could be modeled to reflect that. Yeah, but we have not. Your third question was around the rate of growth and what if it actually occurs more quickly than we thought it might. That can actually be just simply some of the timeframes that where network improvements are triggered, the need for a signal or a roundabout or a widening of the corridor. It's more of a shuffle up on the time frame that's being found. So it really, all this modeling stuff really deals less with exact years. It tries to predict years because that's how we want to know when we need to get budget in place to build things, but really it's a reflection of land use. So if that land use is realized more quickly, that really just means the time frame that it ends up applying to it has just occurred more quickly. So that can be accounted for. I think your fourth question was around Wishart Road as part of the collection of sort of north-south major streets. It's a collector versus the other 3 that you'd mentioned are arterials. It hasn't been identified as any additional substantial laning needs, like 4 laning. Some intersection improvements have been identified sort of on future timeframes. So improvement at Wishart, at Latoria, Wishart, Latoria, additional laning on the approach to Machosen Road one day. So some modest improvements, but not a full scale, like 4 laning by any means or anything. And then your last question was around sort of the model accounts for Colwood and what happens, especially to the north and to the east a little bit. Not included in the model. I hear you in that, yeah, there's congestion that's incurred within Colwood itself, but there's a great deal of congestion that's incurred generally people trying to get on Highway 1 or make their way in or out, I guess, on Highway 1 as well. There is the ability to, we haven't really done it in any level of detail, but account for delay or account for travel time on those corridors. But the model's not necessarily like it's land use focused. And so it's not necessarily, so those projections can be added to any travel time projections that come from the model, but it's not going to account for like land use change out in Saanich or in Victoria or in View Royal and that sort of thing. Yeah, so it can make use of what's happening outside the city, but it's not intentionally modeling it. Yeah, good questions. Yeah, I think I got them all.
Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so it introduced sort of scenario 0, which is existing. It introduced the OCP scenario, which is scenario 1. And then there's a whole suite of sub scenarios for the full build out. And really this work has been done sort of focused on full build out so that we're looking out quite a ways and trying to pre-predict what might be needed one day. And then we can start working back at sort of more tangible timeframes in terms of when investment needs to be made. So the sub scenarios under scenario 2 that have been tested, from left to right scenario, there were sort of 2 sub scenarios, but really they were focused around widening of VMP to 4 lanes and widening of Wishart to 4 lanes, as well as widening the northern extent, well, the portion of Machosen Road that approaches Souk Road, a 4 laning of that section as well. So that.
Dan meant Latoria when he said Wishart.
Oh, yeah, that would have been a lie. I said we're not widening Wishart. Yeah, I meant Latoria. Great clarification. 2A. So 2A is a scenario, it's the second from the left that actually was a scenario founded on each of the 3 major scenarios being, or each of the 3 major corridors being widened, VMP, Latoria, and Machosen. So that's obviously the biggest sort of investment in widening of any of the scenarios. 2C is a widening scenario focused on Machosen Road only. No expanded widening of VMP and none on Latoria as well. And then 2C1, we really got into this exercise and we realized there's sort of limitless number of scenarios. But so we did end up with a 2C.1, which was 4 laning of Machosen, 4 laning of VMP, and sort of more or less status quo, some intersection improvements, but more or less status quo on Latoria. So those are the scenarios. Okay, so I talked about demand model is sort of, we'll call it step 1 in all of this, and then intersection analysis or operational analysis is step 2. So with those scenarios in mind, we're able to essentially output demand patterns, including number of trips that are moving between the various zones I spoke about. And that assigns it to the major corridors, so the major streets only. And from that, we're able to understand what the anticipated traffic volumes are on these streets and then run the analysis according to that. Okay, so model intersections. So we did operational analysis for the intersections that are shown on the map on the screen in front of us, where we really are focused in on so I talked about the various scenario 2 sub-scenarios. We were really focused in on the intersection and corridor performance for those scenarios. So again, infinite number of intersections that could have been analyzed beyond just these, but really the focus was on those that impact the performance of the scenarios that we have in front of us. So maybe I won't go through all of these, but it's the bulk of the either arterial or arterial collector intersections that are along Souk, Machosen, VMP, and Latoria. Okay, so the work is done to assess level of performance or level of service, LOS. It's kind of a letter grade system. A is great, F is failing, and there's sort of a degrading scale between A and F. It deals in delay, so seconds of delay. That's what it's measuring. So with that, we're able to take anticipated corridor volumes under the scenario 2 scenarios for the major roads. They're shown in the column on the right here. These are projected out again for the full scenario 2 build out, and we apply those to the corridors. We're then looking at what's called a volume to capacity ratio, V over C. So volume, how many vehicles, capacity, essentially the corridor or the intersection's ability to handle those vehicles. So a V over C ratio of 1 would mean you have exactly the capacity in place to handle no more than the exact number of vehicles that are traveling through that location. V over C of less than 1, that means you have capacity that's not being entirely utilized. Okay, so for the scenarios I showed before, left to right, so the various widening scenarios around widening VMP, widening Latoria, widening Machosen, we're able to run the analysis at the intersection level and draw some conclusions on what the vehicle capacity ratio will be under each of those scenarios. So the map that's on the screen in front of us is showing not only the dashed lines around the corridors that would be widened under each of the various scenarios, it's showing the performance in terms of a measure of V over C. The overseas of red or dark red are locations where volumes are exceeding capacity, and we can expect to significant amount of delay and or the need to make further still intersection improvements, upgrades. The overseas that are sort of lighter orange, yellow, and green, those are locations where performance is anticipated to be fine, to be good. And so we start to see some of the differences where each scenario performs a little differently depending on where the added capacity has been placed. Won't go through it all in detail, but you can sort of a few of the key takeaways. The 2C, the scenario that focuses the widening on Machosen, we start to see a lot of unmet demand on veterans. We see vehicles start to stack up on that corridor. Conversely, scenarios around widening of Latoria and VMP or just widening of VMP, we start to see the sort of a more negative impact occurring on Machosen. More so on the section in the south, because under each of those scenarios, we are talking about 4-laning of Machosen in the northern between Wishart and Souk. But you start to see kind of the differing performance levels between the various scenarios.
And just have a question for you from Taylor. So maybe stay on that slide for a moment.
I was just wondering, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but is the model static? So an example in scenario 2C, we 4-lane Machosen, and you see the overload happening on VMP. Is that just assuming static growth as if the increased number on VMP continued, or is it accounting for that cars would probably deviate and actually go and take Machosen?
It's accounting for that balancing that we believe is going to occur. Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out in the operational analysis that none of the scenarios that we're looking at are really making much difference on Souk Road. And so I think that there is a discussion that we will need to have in terms of effort and return on investment. And Roger has a question.
Dan, I understand these, but my concern is why wasn't 3-laning Machosen Road taken into consideration? There's, by my count, there's 118 private driveways on Machosen Road. So if you have 4 lanes, that means cars are stopping in the fast lane, having to cross 2 lanes of traffic to get into their driveway, and then vice versa when they're coming out. 3 lanes allows for traffic to move into the center line, let the traffic flow as it be. And from the engineers in Camp River told me that 2 lanes will handle up to 35,000 cars a day. So why are we even looking at 4 lanes?
Yeah, it's a good question, observation. For the sake of the modeling exercise, it's fairly binary in terms of 2-lane, 4-lane, where we could set up a model that included an intersection at every driveway access, and that would simulate the scenario you're getting at. For sort of like simplicity's sake, we've kept it as it's a 2-lane throughput or 4-lane throughput. However, yeah, when we kind of get to some of the I guess key takeaways from all this work is our expectation is it isn't truly it's going to be 2 or it's going to be 4 and nothing in between. There will be turn lanes at intersections. There will be signalized intersections where an additional through lane might be necessary just to get the traffic to clear the intersection before it goes red again. We might see an extended center 2-way left turn lane that would facilitate the driveway access that you're talking about. We might even see center boulevards with street trees and plantings and stuff in them too. So the modeling exercise, it is a little bit sort of oversimplified in terms of the scenario that it's carrying out. But the reality is, once we pick a scenario or scenarios to progress to next steps, some sort of functional demonstration of what the actual laning will be is going to be needed, and follow-up testing can be done on that if we want to see how that improves performance in terms of turning vehicles out of the through lanes. But again, it's this, I feel like a theme here is a bit of anything is possible. It just takes more time and effort. Yeah.
follow up.
If I read your charts right, though, considering 4 lane, you're estimating anywhere from 26 to $40 million. That's a lot of money. You're gonna have to expropriate land or buy land. And even if you put left-hand turn lanes at intersections, you still have those 118 driveways for individuals to make left-hand turns. So would it not make better sense just forget 4 laning and go right to 3 laning?
I'm with you on the frequency of driveways on Machosen, absolutely, in terms of 3 versus 4. You know, from the modeling exercise, it is a kind of a throughput and congestion measuring type exercise. And so 3 helps deal with some of those intersections, 3 all the way. Unless we were to model again at the driveway level, every single driveway, it's not going to recognize the difference of doing that.
Okay, on to Stuart.
So sorry, I'm sort of harping on the same thing as Roger does, because like Roger, I intuitively think 3 lanes on Machosen would be beneficial. And, you know, you give some answers about the model, what the model can and can't do. But this isn't your first rodeo. So, you know, you must have some thoughts on 3 laning roads with a lot of driveways, and do they help, or, you know, is there some traffic sort of quirk that Roger and I don't see that you clearly see? I mean, so intuitively, do you think a 3rd lane on Machosen would improve traffic flow?
So so that's a really good question. And I could spend an hour on this, but we'll spend 2 minutes. If you go up and down the corridor, there are sections, by the fire hall, Royal Roads is, you know, the fence section along that entire section through there. It doesn't have the same value because you'd only have the one side in, so maybe not through there. We get it back in behind Dunsmuir and Ben Homer and Hatley's back in there. I believe in future, and this might be a little ways out, we're going to start to see the need for turn lanes at some of those sort of more, not fully minor, but more minor intersections. As soon as you introduce a turn lane, you've created that width with the taper, the angle that's needed to get into that bay, that all of a sudden the width that's needed to achieve that. And if you were to just attack a center left turn lane on the back of that, or a center median with trees or whatever might make most sense, the spatial impact of that becomes a lot less. So what I could see is as some of those turn lanes the need for those starts coming online, like further into the future, that's when we really start to look closely at a center turn lane to get sort of back to back with those turn lanes to get those turners out of the through lane.
Thank you. That's good. Do you have more? Okay, carry on. I'm waiting for you. Oh, he's not on. I'm sorry.
I was going to say thank you for that, and I'll be patient.
Oh, we're still on. I've lost you. Oh, no, you're up.
I'm
There
on,
we
yeah.
go.
I was just wondering about how the model takes into things that seem intangible for the model, but are very tangible for us, because I know this is about corridors and intersections. But I'm thinking Machosen in particular, Sangster, because that to me is the biggest slowdown point, but also the fact that our fire hall is on Machosen, and we obviously need to have flowing traffic through there so that emergency services can get to where they need to go.
You have an answer?
Was there a question in there?
Just how does the
Yeah.
model account for those things, or does it account for those things, or when do those things start to get taken into account?
Yeah.
Because it's nice that we can see that, you know, 4 laning it does this, but really 4 laning it doesn't do that if Sangster's still there and kids are still crossing the road and parents are still doing drop off. So that data is meaningless without accounting for that very real thing that might not be an input in the model right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. The elementary school plus fire hall and the need to remain open for emergency access. I think it can report out on conditions during busy times of the day. Quite honestly, we could populate it with conditions for any time of the day we want. We just base capacity conclusions on when it's busy typically. It will, a model like this would have a very challenging time trying to simulate the I have 3 kids in elementary school, so what happens out in front of an elementary school is quite atypical, I would say. It's going to have a very difficult time accounting for the performance or the condition that's happening in that location. I would argue more important would be some sort of in-field or in-service safety review around the patterns of drop-off and pickup typically, and families walking and cycling to and from. And what added traffic through those locations, whatever the added volume might be, would like what that would look like in terms of layering that on what's already happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Kim.
I think if I'm not mistaken, the school district has been notified that they have to deal with the right of way. They're in the right of way of the city and they've been given that notice. And um, honestly, schools exist in Vancouver on busy streets. So um, I think moving that parking lot and that entrance area to the side or looking for a different avenue might prevent the slowdown along the chosen road. Also, the fake like playground area that we have invented to make the extent of the road as long as it is as a 30 zone is confusing and not necessary either. So I think in order to make schools it's safer for kids to get to school, we've almost overdone it and it needs to be, I think that needs to be addressed. But I think that that could alleviate some of the concern there. So, thanks.
I was just going to add that I think that it's great that we're thinking about specific locations and what the issues are there. But we also need to remember that when we're looking at our full build out, a long time from now scenario, the last scenario, the configuration of these properties may not be the same. Like that's just a reality of densification along roadways and that redevelopment in some of these areas. And I'm not suggesting that anybody's forced to redevelop, but it may not look like what we think it would look like. We're trying to do our best guess to look at kind of big picture thinking with little picture details. But if there is a particular modeling that we could envision being very informative, that's something that council might need to hear from this committee so that we could recommend to council, hey, the infrastructure committee thinks that you should look at this area with the modeling. And I would suggest that one of the times that's maybe worth looking at, I know we're looking at the busiest time frame in the morning, but the other time frame that I see happening on all the roads in every municipality as I'm going around the community is the school pickup time. Because all of the roads everywhere, the cashiers get busier at Thrifties, people are clearing out of even the Costco parking lot because they got to go pick up kids from school. And they're driving all over to different, like people aren't in their catchment areas and all those things. It's impacting our roads. So I guess my question is that busy AM model able to be used for an afternoon school pickup time, or do we need more information? Would it be vastly different in some way?
Yeah. Love the line of thinking there. And I'm with you that some of the patterns around school pickup there's a lot going on there. The way the demand model's been set up, it has been populated and calibrated to reflect that morning busiest hour. It wouldn't be a full redo or a full second model it could still reflect all of the same land use existing and land use scenarios I went through, but we would need to essentially run another model with that calibration exercise done to make sure it's reflecting that sort of 2 to 3 or 230 to 330 period. So there would be a fair bit of effort involved in that, but it wouldn't be like starting from scratch. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I push on?
You push on,
Yeah, thank
please.
you. Okay. So I guess, yeah, with the various scenarios and sub scenarios in mind, we kind of went through this exercise of assessing level of service and then volume to capacity ratio. And that led us to sort of zero in on 2 sub scenarios. And so that these have been the topic of some conversation as well. So the one scenario shown on the map on the left side is the Latoria and VMP widened scenario. The one on the right is the VMP and Machosen widened scenario. I think what we wanted to sort of demonstrate in all of this is that from a performance perspective, neither's perfect. The sort of delay will be incurred, you know, over on one corridor or over on the other, depending on where the capacity adds go and sort of like the timing and how quickly they come online. I think important to note, I'm not sure if I'm touching on this later or not. I think I will, but these diagrams, we all sort of gravitate toward diagrams. This is oversimplifying what the improvement, the full package of improvements would be. If it were a Latorian VMP focused widening, there would still need to be intersection upgrades, turn lanes, potential for a third center turn lane on Machosen over time. Vice versa, if the widening efforts were to happen over on Machosen, there would still be the need for more modest upgrades on Latoria as well. So it's not just widen this or widen that. It's kind of a suite of improvements that would be necessary to kind of keep things moving over time. Yeah, I think we touched on this. Okay, yeah, and then one of the kind of choke points that becomes apparent in all of this, and I understand you're experiencing it to an extent today, is in the vicinity of VMP Souk and VMP Allendale. And so under either scenario, there's a focusing on essentially building out of VMP over time as well. But that our expectation is we'll still need added capacity under either scenario along VMP. So very specifically at VMP and Souk and VMP Allendale as well. John mentioned as well the pushing forward on signalization at Cairndale, which is more of an immediate thing. Okay, and this is just sort of capturing what I'd mentioned a second ago, where it really is the exercise has been focused on widen this one or widen that one, but really is kind of a suite of improvements that whether, you know, one is addressed full scale, Latoria or Machosen, the expectation is the other will still require improvements over time as well. So some of those under a Machosen Road corridor widening, we do anticipate that the volume of driveways that are along that corridor will present a real challenge. And it's something that as you add traffic to a corridor with a number of driveways, that really is sort of opposed to the typical objectives around arterials or more major streets. We typically actually want to, like VMP is actually a great example. We want to limit the number of access so that the high volumes of traffic can continue to flow. So kind of a key takeaway on a scenario that might involve widening Machosen Road. We expect that dual northbound left turn lanes will be required at Wishart Machosen or Souk Machosen to accommodate if traffic is incentivized to use Machosen, there's going to be an on and off point at the ends as well. So added capacity needed to address that. And then the need for signalization or capacity adds at some of the more kind of secondary intersections along the corridor, Lagoon, Painter, Hatley as examples. I think under the Latoria Road widening scenario, Latoria Byzantin is anticipated to need signalization. The added through traffic on Latoria is going to make it that much more difficult to find gaps for traffic trying to get on and off of Byzantin. So expectation is there. And then the expectation that even if Latoria is the focus for major corridor capacity adds, that there still will be some fairly significant needs on Machosen Road as well. And so the section of Machosen between Wishart and Souk is being assumed to need to be widened to 4 lanes over time. The exact timing and trigger of that will somewhat depend on whether the capacity add is added to Machosen over time or the capacity add is added to Latoria over time. Okay, so stepping outside like this, we'd sort of structured this conversation to go from a modeling exercise to understand what the major street network might look like over time, and then funnel that into sort of like directions that can be woven into the TMP update. And I know we're not having the TMP conversation tonight, but what we did want to kind of, I guess, just introduce and get on everyone's mind is this idea that I sort of concluded that there's a package of improvements under either scenario that can result in adequate traffic performance over time. Traffic performance, we need to be looking out beyond simply just traffic. There's a way we can make that work. It's just lots and lots of money. We need to think beyond simply the traffic component of the street network into some of the other factors that might go into determining which is the right scenario to pursue. So, but I think.
Could you just back up for a minute to your options analysis slide before that? Because I'm having a hard time understanding what the little graphic is trying to tell us.
Just a summarization of which corridors are widened or which scenario. So the check mark means yes, widened.
Oh, okay, I see.
Don't worry about that too much. We've covered the scenarios well.
Okay, I just found part of my difficulty in taking what we have in the model and putting that into a plan that's defensible to move forward is there's too many ifs because where are our actual problems today? Our actual problems today, predictable when you brought up your intersection analysis. When VMP was created in 2002, the intersection at VMP and Souk Road was an F- predicted from the start. So, I mean, that is our reality. It was predicted, and here we are. And if anybody, I mean, that is our busiest intersection, just because it is. Those are 2 busy roads. And I don't think we have any solutions suggested here that are going to address all of our community's needs. If it's a traffic circle, there's not quite as much room as we might like. Traffic circles naturally have some problems for pedestrians and cyclists. There's no magic, make it perfect answer. So I'm trying to figure out what the best use for this data that we have is to go forward, given that we're kind of in this imperfect spot of not having perfect information, but more information than we've had before, which is good. But we are still in a position of trying to make the traffic work in Colwood for Colwoodians, but totally impacted by what's already happening around us everywhere. So I guess I'm just trying to see where we're having negative impacts from upgrading certain roads. Where is it going to be worthwhile, and how do I get this model to show that? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
mean, I agree with the statement that, like, there's not a silver bullet here. I'm not presenting them like something that says if we build all this, it'll be perfect and it'll be, green lines at every intersection. The reality is that won't be the case. And as new capacity opens up, added development will come online and we kind of know how this goes. I do think though that like, with a model in place, you can run all the scenarios you'd like. And so, with quite literally no limit. And so it's this, we can, not me, but
Little bit of a financial restriction.
yeah, not wrong. But it's this, yeah, we can test anything we'd like. And so, if that's a focusing on what's happening at, Sukin BMP or the BMP Allendale and the whole vicinity there, that can be done. The intersection set up as its own traffic model. The inputs are outputs from your demand model. And we understand if we put capacity over here or put capacity over here, traffic shifts to and makes that intersection worse, or it shifts away and makes that intersection better. At the end of the day, though, it is, that's all sort of analysis for the sake of understanding. We still need to sort of work through what the actual solution is going to be.
Yeah, because for the part that I guess is least well understood is the inclusion of the access between Machosen and Veterans Memorial Parkway through the Allendale pit. So part of my brain just really wants to explore, well, what if that was like Ring Road, in the very distant future, so that we didn't have to, create so many intersections? What if Souk Road was one way and whatever that Allendale connector to Machosen became like the world's biggest traffic circle?
Could be modeled. It'd be very fun.
But that's sort of the level that we're at when we get to at some point in the future with congestion on Souk Road, because that is our problem area. It's probably the most difficult area of Colwood and yet the least developed with any options to support it. Okay, I'll let you carry on.
Okay, so the next piece we had a sort of a pros cons table of sorts where we took the kind of the scenarios that have been focused in on and considered their benefit, disbenefit across criteria other than just traffic performance. And so that's what this table is articulating. I think I'll pick up on a few of the key pieces. I think row 2 speaks to right of way. So the width of the property the road sits in that would need to be expanded under other scenario to achieve the width needed for 4 lanes. It came up earlier. We've got a very large number of single family parcels generally up and down the Machosen Road corridor. We would need, we need to go through a bit of a design exercise to figure out exactly how much, but we do know that for a large number of those properties, we would need width from them to achieve the right-of-way width needed to expand to 4 lanes. We know on Latoria, there's still added width that would be necessary, but we're dealing with a more limited number of private landowners. And so if those properties, including like Latoria North is being contemplated right now, as those come up for redevelopment, I think we're talking about 8 or 10 parcels that need to be a certain sliver of land along their frontage acquired rather than, I think the number was 80 plus along Machosen. So that's sort of a benefit in terms of acquiring that right away for Latoria, and would make that conceivably more achievable in a sort of a shorter time frame. Which relates really to the 3rd row. I think in terms of utilities, we've got utility poles up and down Machosen Road. Again, can be done. They would need to move out of the current space that would be needed to achieve the 4 lanes. It can be done. It's cost. We don't have the similar challenges on Latoria. In terms of environmental, we know there's some potential widening impacts of Latoria in the vicinity of Latoria Creek. We don't have the same water course challenges on Machosen. We do know that there's a very large number of mature trees up and down Machosen that we haven't spec'd out exactly what the impact would be, but we know it would be greater on mature trees. And then we've done some extremely high level cost estimating on the costs incurred by widening each of these corridors. And we've got, again, the Machosen Road corridor up higher than the Latoria Road corridor would be. There's a lot of variability in those numbers, but just trying to make a kind of a apples to apples comparison of the two in terms of cost. And I think the last thing we wanted to bring up was just there's been conversation in past with the community and around the council table as well around roundabouts and their place in this community. And have your own operational roundabout in Colwood, which is great. And so we did put a little bit of time into understanding where roundabouts might have a place with further roundabouts at intersections in the community. So we've highlighted a couple on the map here as well. Generally speaking, so traffic circles, those are traffic calming. They slow cars down, they help bikeway movements. Roundabouts, they're traffic control devices. So we don't just sort of put them in where we want to slow down traffic. We put them in where congestion's occurred. So you're often looking at either a signal or a roundabout. And there's generally scenarios where traffic is balanced and there's a concern around major crashes, safety concerns, where roundabouts have great benefit. There are also certain scenarios where traffic signals a better fit. So we haven't necessarily come to a concrete conclusion, but we have identified a number of the major intersections where a roundabout might make sense in future. Those are shown on the map here to the right.
Can I just get you to back up one slide?
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to ask you, because the shallow utilities, I believe that Latoria does have utilities under the road, both hydro and sewer, or not hydro, water and sewer are under the road. And I think we need to work on our understanding of the environment in that area, that there's a lot of attenuation of stormwater going on through the peat bog and through that stream course as well. That's just a concern that I have, because I know there were difficulties in putting those utilities under the road. And I'll go to Stuart.
I had a zinger of a question and, oh, yeah, on the roundabouts, you indicate there's safety. They're safer. And is that true now that we have a bunch of ones to look at in the study? Is that true for pedestrians too and cyclists? I must admit, I sometimes wonder crossing roundabouts on foot or bike, whether they're safer than an intersection.
Yeah, really good question. There's sort of honestly mixed reviews on that. With the splitter islands that you generally get on the entrance to a roundabout, it allows refuge for a pedestrian to make a two-stage crossing. Look this way, cross, look that way, cross. There's safety benefit there. I know sort of like generally in the North American context, roundabouts are still new, and both pedestrians and motorists haven't sort of to varying extents, but haven't fully, we're just not totally there yet. So there's a bit of indecision and sort of a little bit of concern around that. So I think it's I guess I can't give you a hard yes or no, but there's advantage, disadvantage in both directions. Yeah. I think you didn't touch on traffic safety, but traffic safety, we know roundabouts deal with your T-bones and your head-ons, and that's a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that they put in Langford, I happened to be there when a cyclist was going through. Just deadly because the visibility is everything, and just going through the circle, it took. I met the same cyclist 3 times in the same traffic circle, and it's I had my heart in my mouth for them on 2 of the occasions, just because I didn't think other people were maybe going to see them. So I don't know. There's maybe some work to be done. Oh, sorry. Sure.
And this is the page that I'm really interested in, and Machosen Road. I look at it, you say the 4-lane Machosen. you possibly need 1 to 3 meters in certain areas. You would require purchasing that from 80 different households. I know some of them, I think John pointed out one time, there's a garage so close to the sidewalk, if we take anything away, the garage is useless. So it may require purchasing the whole piece of property because now he can't park his car. So I go down there, significant redevelopment, yes. Significant utility pole relocation. Yeah, I counted there's 58 poles on one side, 68 on the other. The 11 down, I call it Machosen Hill. I don't think would have to be relocated. They're far enough off to the side. Significant amount of removal of mature trees, which a lot of people want to see saved. So I look at these reasons and say, it's a no-brainer. Why are we even considering 4 lanes on Machosen Road? You wouldn't have to require 3 meters for that extra lane, putting 3 in. So you save all that money. And I really think 25 to $40 million in a small community like Colwood is a significant hit. And you could probably get that number down to probably, I have no idea, but I would think probably in the neighborhood of 25 million with 3 lanes. So I just think we're flogging a dead horse on that one. And we should be seriously looking at 3 laning and doing a modeling, figuring out the cost, the comparison, because even 4 lanes, you're going to be blocking traffic while people make left-hand turns out of that fast lane. And you're putting them in a very unsafe condition because they have to cross 2 oncoming traffic lanes. So I don't know, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And Taylor.
Not something I know that's probably in the model, but just a couple of thoughts that I'll put out here and maybe you can run with it or not, but 3rd lane and just think about other ideas, right? Is there any consideration of modeling the idea of 3 lanes and that, 3rd lane's a flex lane alternating? We see that in Vancouver, right? Peak traffic going out 2 lanes, peak traffic coming in 2 lanes. Another thought, traffic signal optimization, like does that happen in our community and then actually through the greater community? Because that would obviously affect modeling as well. If that isn't done or hasn't been done in a while or has never been considered or has been, that's good to know. And then the only other point I had was, again, maybe the impact of addressing those intangibles, the school zones and that sort of thing with not widening the road, but maybe providing some sort of pedestrian infrastructure and overpass for people to actually get over a road instead of having to widen a road and do all sorts of things like that. All these things I think would probably impact ultimately what the decision is going to be. And I'm sure, like I said, the model doesn't account for those, but I don't know if you have any points on those, but just getting those ideas out there, I guess.
Yeah, I'd very happily respond to at least a couple of those. I think the model that's come up, a center 2-way left turn lane, we have examples of that in the region, like Royal Oak Drive in Saanich is a part of Royal Oak Drive is configured in that scenario. There is precedent for that, and I think it could help, especially in the instance where you've got double loaded driveways on both sides of the street. Get those turn vehicles out of the 3 lane, and we can do modeling, like we can build in some assumptions on how many of those vehicles would utilize that. It'd be very difficult. We run simulations where it's kind of like SimCity. It won't simulate that very well. It won't simulate that, but in the outputs, we can account for that. Signal coordination is a great idea. It really starts to have benefit where signals are in closer proximity. So I could see something like that on portions of Souk Road, where we do have a number of them. Down Machosen and Latoria, probably less so, but absolutely worth considering, especially as new intersections are being considered for signal. They don't work when roundabouts are in place, but they could when signals are. And your 3rd point around safety, sort of not necessarily widening, but focusing on the safety around schools. I tend to agree. It's not really like a model related thing, but I do think there's a lot of benefit in that. I know there are communities that have very specific programs around enhancing safety around schools. So something that might make sense here too.
Okay, carry on.
Well, actually, that's all I had.
Yeah.
I had a concluding slide that I believe we've kind of worked through this already, but neither of these or none of the scenarios is perfect from a traffic perspective. They are based on a full build out, so we aren't going to be realizing this for the conditions we talk about for quite some time. But it is important we are as proactive as we can be in terms of assembling the right of way that we need to achieve what we will need one day. And then also just wanted to sort of reiterate that this reflects the busiest time of the day. This is not all times of the day, but the busiest times. Yep.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything else from the committee? Not seeing any, then we will move back to, oh, sorry, Stuart. My apologies.
Well, that's okay. I just a couple of thoughts, I guess. I guess I'm not overly fussed about trying to project out to 2060. Yeah, we could make some great roads in Colwood and they could feed into Souk Road that's got so many lanes and it's not going to get bigger and everybody else is going to grow. There's got to be answers besides just more roads and more cars going in the same way, whether that's better transit or, congestion charges or whatever. There's going to be changes, but I think we are at the point where we should define what we are going to do, and how fast it comes, I think, is really dependent more on the pace of development than the, necessarily the years. Because I think the development may in fact happen a little quicker for a few years, maybe some slowdowns, who knows? But I think it is important that we sort of define kind of broadly what we think council should, or Colwood as a whole should do with their traffic, and I think now is a chance to do that. And I think it's especially important that as the development goes on, that we have an understanding of what these costs are going to be, and we can make sure that the development cost charges are appropriate, and that, the last thing we want to do is not plan for or build infrastructure. We saw those numbers that Dan presented, the last thing we want to do is let all the development happen and say, oops, we need $60 million worth of roads. That's a disaster. I thought the report was good. A few little tweaks, but I liked it. I thought it gave me the information I needed. I actually prepared a motion to move this forward if that's of interest to people. I could actually send it to, can I send it to you and put it on the screen? Just corporate services, would that work? Let me try that, because as I said, Dan said it better, that it's never going to be perfect. But I think to me, there's enough information to decide. And I guess I probably lived with some of this infrastructure stuff for a lot more years than some of you have. So I'll understand if that's not the will of the majority. But just left me, that much I know. Again, I think it's our role here to sort of provide what our thoughts are to council, and let council make the decision and move forward as they see fit. I understand there's more process to go on, to go to the public and whatever, but as I said, I thought I saw what I needed here. I think I've heard at least some parts of it echoed from others tonight. So I'll happily cede the floor to others that want to speak while we try to get this motion up. And then if I have the motion, I'll make it. And if somebody wants to second, I'll motivate.
Thanks. I'm just going to check with staff if they would like us to carry on discussing while they're trying to make all the parts come together, if they'd like us to give them a couple minutes. It's hard being that person trying to make the records work and get everything up on the screen, and they're still talking and I'm going to kill somebody. Been there, done that. I know, I'm just waiting for the minute takers to be ready to be hearing. I know, but if we carry on doing our work while they're trying to get caught up to us. I'm just giving them 2 minutes.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. Thought we were gonna continue talking while they were getting.
No, they asked for
Oh.
just a little minute to catch up, and then we'll all be on the same page, and then we'll keep on talking. Just as a pause. We should put on the Jeopardy music.
Question. Is Colwood owned or responsible for the Sioux Road section, or is it provincial? I know Becky.
It's ours.
Provincial.
It's ours. That's a whole nother question of should it be? We didn't get a choice. That happened. I'm sorry, but can I ask you to just hang on for 1 minute, just give them a moment to catch up? I know everybody wants to keep on going, but just need a minute. All right, Don, go ahead.
Thank you. And it's not for the motion itself specifically. It's a question before that. And this is really further to my question earlier is through this modeling, has it been extended to the Souk corridor as well? Which is part of my question around who owns it or who's responsible for it. And John, you might have some further information on that, but it's really, is there an additional work going on around that corridor as well to help support the feeder that we're potentially looking through here?
So we currently own responsibility from Souk VMP intersection down through Souk to View Royal. The ministry owns from Souk VMP
Road.
to Jacqueline. And then out and beyond through Langford.
Wow.
They also own VMP from Souk and VMP out to the highway. So we have the ability to maintain, do various works with their approval. So when developments come in, we get approval from them. They are currently doing what they're calling a Highway 14 corridor study. That study basically starts in Langford, comes down to Souk Road, turns left on VMP and goes out to the highway. As part of that initial corridor study, they engaged both our side and the Langford side to have conversations about Souk Road and VMP and looking at each individual intersection. Langford at this time is also working on a traffic model as well. So we'll switch data back and forth so that we know what they're doing, they know what we're doing. So we'll see their traffic impacts as they grow and how it works into our model, which is one of the positives of this model. But from part of that corridor study, they've now stepped forward and council went to UBCM back in 2023 and asked the province to look at a roundabout specifically at Souk and VMP. And they're now engaged in that study currently to look at a double and or turbo roundabout at Souk and VMP and where it's at. The provincial election going on, I don't know if that'll impact that study, but as of now, that study is undergoing and we're expecting to see results with regards to a design of a roundabout there sometime in early 2025.
So I guess that feeds into further that question as well as with that very real possibility coming in with that roundabout at that location. What does that do for your modeling going forward that you're currently working on? You've done so far, plus what you're working on in the future.
One of the things that led to the province to make that decision is that we have already been working on that intersection and determined at that time that Dan and his team that it would be beneficial to have a roundabout there. And the ministry took that information that Urban Systems gave them and used that to justify the study.
Okay. Still don't think I know the answer to the first question though, is there further work or further investigation along the Souk corridor itself from Veterans Memorial through to View Royal? as part of, as we improve all of the infrastructure feeding into it, is there a further investigation on that corridor specifically within Colwood?
Yeah, that is part of this model. I mean, what we are currently doing with regards to that particular corridor is we know that our most congested is that piece from VMP to Machosen. That is absolutely our worst piece. So I think at the end of the day, that's going to elevate itself somewhere near the top of the priority. But also throughout that entire corridor that you mentioned, every development that shows up and knocks on the door, we're trying to take the land that we need for the width in Souk, and we're taking 30 meters total right of way, so that if the decision was made and we haven't got to that step in the process, we could 6-lane Souk Road. It would be wide enough to do that with a 30-meter right of way. But we haven't gone down that path and looked at that evolution. And that 6 lanes doesn't necessarily mean more traffic. It could be 2 dedicated transit lanes.
Yeah.
Right. It could be some form of modal shift with regards to an AM and PM peak as one of those lanes, and a transit lane as another. There's a lot of work that would go in there to make those decisions, but we are trying to take the land to allow that to occur sometime well into the future.
Thank you. Yeah, because I did see the work going for the transit lanes in the View Royal section of the Souk Road, or I guess Island Highway, that
Yeah.
called by that time.
Yeah.
But can you see that being extended through?
There is a
uh,
transit
possible?
project that we're working with transit now to try to implement right at the Wanda Fuca Center there. It's not nearly extensive what's going on in View Royal, but there's a small jump lane, Q lane there.
Thank you.
I think that just my history to what we have thus far on the terms of Souk Road. It was downloaded to Colwood. I think it was 2004 or 2005, and it was a process that the province undertook under the Liberals. They were devolving highways to municipalities throughout the region that were so that they were concentrating their resources on their major highways. So where they were doing improvements on the Island Highway, they gave up on Souk Road and said, that's yours, we'll do VMP. That's why they retained that little stretch from Jacqueline to VMP under their direction. And it was my understanding that we weren't allowed to mess with the signalization at Souk and VMP unless they said we could.
John, is there any truth to the fact that if there's a chain link fence 5 feet high with a gate, a school zone doesn't have to be reduced to 30 kilometers an hour? I know 2 schools on Mackenzie don't have school zone speeds, one being Reynolds, the other being St. Margaret's. So I'm wondering, and I, like Kim, I've seen many in Vancouver. It's 50 kilometers an hour. The school has I'm not sure if it's a 5 or 6 with the gate, and there's no school zone. So do you know if there's any truth to that?
I do not actually. I don't know if Dan knows that answer about school zones either. I do know there are school zones that don't have 30K, but I'm not sure what the parameters are within the regulations for that. I have to look into that.
Yeah. Could you do that, please? Thank you. And one final question to Stuart. Would Stuart entertain breaking that down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate motions? Because some of them I can truly support.
Well, that's not up to Stuart, that's up to the committee.
Well,
So because
But he's
that,
moving it.
I know, but the mover doesn't own it, makes the motion, and then we don't have a seconder because we're at committee, so the motion is on the floor. And we're gonna debate the motion, and so we can consider each point separately. I'll go to Kim.
I just had a question about the Allendale, the full build out of that. Is that Allendale to like from Wishart to VMP? And then from Machosen? Is that like connected to Allendale to VMP? Like when you say full build out?
So if I'm understanding correctly, so essentially the straight east-west line of Allendale between VMP, Wishart, yes. in terms of the Machosen piece, what was the,
Is there also a connection from the chosen to,
If you went back to your presentation slide, it's on there in the diagram.
okay, I think another one you're talking about, so it intercepts Machosen approximately midway between Wishart and Suk.
okay, and that's the build out there?
Yeah, now there's been a conversation around whether that's a street or just an active transportation connection of sorts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just had a couple other points. The question about the school. Like, I get the whole question about that, but the school's in the right of way. The school needs to be given notice to move its parking lot out of the right of way. And that's the school's problem. Like, I mean, we all need to work together on this, but they've been given their notice to do that. And that alleviates part of that issue there. It still is a narrow area, but having that frontage off and somewhere else. So somebody needs to be looking into that area. And then somebody mentioned the fire hall too. I think View Royal is right off of View Royal Fire Hall is right off of whatever that, I guess, Island Highway, whatever that road is there. And sorry. Oh, and they just moved from the area that they were in to another area on the same street. So getting in and out mustn't be an issue. It's the same with the RCMP. They are really blocked in where they're located. And so I understand that there's some areas there that to consider, but I don't think that's that big of issues. And I think I had another question, but I can't think of it. So that's all I have. I just had to ask those questions about Allendale and stuff. Thank you.
So, sorry, I know we need to get to discussing the motion. I just want to ask staff, did you understand the questions that were being raised? Will we get answers later on the school issues? Okay, great, thank you. Can you bring back up the motion? Perfect. So, Stuart, did you want to motivate? Or do you want us to just look at each issue?
It sounds like maybe going issue by issue would make sense. I'm
Yeah,
okay with that.
I
Yeah.
think so.
So let's start with the 4-lane road, Latoya Road option, expanding Latoya Road from Machosen to BMP, complete with obviously the intersection upgrades, signalization as required. I think that we look at the choice between Machosen and Latoya BMP. To me, it's pretty obvious that we should be creating some capacity going from Latoya to BMP, and that maybe 30, 40 years down the road, there will be an opportunity to widen Machosen, that there will be enough developments that have occurred that the property will be acquired and that could be done. But I just think that Machosen is a very long-term option. So I think if we endorse this and some of the other things in there, it'll give council guidance, and which of course they may or may not take, but I think that would be the guidance that would help move this forward.
Kim,
Sorry, Stuart, I can't endorse the 4-laning of Latoya. I don't think it's a logical option when you're traveling, and I don't understand why we have Royal Bay. We built out this beautiful, a walkable community, and we're gonna plow 4 lanes through it and make it a speed zone, because that's eventually what they become. So I can't agree with that, but I do think that your suggestion about Machosen is right, but I think we should have been doing this all along. I think we should have been purchasing up homes along the way as they became available, and I think we should have been looking at that long before now. So, and we should have really looked at that before we made a decision to put 3,000 more doors over at the beachlands, like before we increase the density there. So I don't think that that was thought out properly. So I can't endorse one, but the rest, they're pretty good.
Thank you, Kim. For myself, seeing nobody else clicking in to talk about the Latoria Road issue, I can't support 4 lanes on Latoria Road for a few reasons. I think that the natural infrastructure that exists within that corridor is important. The history of flooding in that area is long, and removing the just not even thinking about anything else but the environment itself. That peat bog is attenuating a lot of the stormwater that's coming off of Triangle Mountain, and to just say that we're going to find a way, pull out the peat, fill it with rock, whatever the methodology is. There's a lot of concerns that I have for what that would look like in our future atmospheric river events. Currently, during the rains that we just had a couple of days ago, the water is running completely on the surface of the properties adjacent to Latoria Road. And there's some pretty massive storm sewer infrastructure that's been in existence for 35 years at least, that exists there to move that water. And small changes have caused big problems. And there's also a lot of consideration as to whether or not we have the sewer capacity for the number of homes that are being proposed in that area. My understanding is that that sewer line that runs from Olympic View to Royal Bay is our most oversubscribed sewer line. It is underneath the road. There's also water infrastructure underneath the road. It's been problematic in the past. And as a major transportation corridor, the rock wall that's been built there could potentially shut that road down in the event of an earthquake or other natural disaster. So what would we have done all that for? I don't think that we've considered all of the ground conditions in that area in a way that I feel comfortable with expanding to a potentially 4-lane road. Because I can tell you all the stories of how people got out of there 30 years ago, whether it's the snow or the ice or the flooding that shut down the road. So for me, those are important natural environmental benefits that are provided in that area that I don't want to lose. And the potential costs in the future for the taxpayers of Colwood if we build a road over a peat bog. I don't think that's a sustainable choice. It has 2 lanes. It does connect people to VMP now. I think that all of the potential upgrades that we're looking at on this big map with all of the options are going to be implemented more slowly over time, like the 4-laning of Minchosen Road to Wishart is kind of a given. That is something I've known we've needed since I was first elected in 2002. And we haven't been able to fathom having enough money to do that one section. We're getting there now. I think the inclusion of access from Minchosen Road to Allendale Road is important for the cross connections in our community to help us have options. I think Carindale is an important intersection and road, but I think like Machosen Road, we may eventually get to where certain areas are widened or where certain volumes are accommodated so that things can funnel away from pinch points that are more than likely still going to exist in the future. Taylor.
Thanks. I guess what I do support about four laning Latoria is capitalizing on the significant opportunity and the efficiency of doing it now when that area is being redeveloped and it's open, right? If we don't do it now, then I don't think we're going to do it. And I'm also very supportive of the points you just brought up, Chair, about the ramifications and all the natural concerns. The only thing that I would say is if we're not doing Latoria, then I think the reality is we're committing to Machosen. And I think that's just the simple fact. So it then doesn't become just a Machosen from soup to Wishart. It becomes, let's get on with Machosen all the way down. That's my take on it.
Okay, Roger.
I think engineering can easily handle the peat bog. If you realize that on Veterans Memorial, after you cross Soup and go down, that was a peat bog.
No.
And then when you go further along by Kelly Road on the chosen side, that is part of a peat bog. So they built a floating road on a peat bog and it works very well. As far as the argument about sewer, 3,000 doors have already been improved. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to build the infrastructure and the transportation to handle that. My concern, if anything, would be feeding more traffic onto Veterans Memorial. And when we get into Langford, it's just a hodgepodge. It's dead. It's just bumper to bumper for hours. So that's my concern. It's not Colwood's concern because it's in another municipality. But I really believe the engineering is here to handle four-laning Latoria. It's not a hill I'm prepared to fight and die on, but I trust we could do it satisfactorily.
Okay, so then on four-laning Machosen Road, I will call the question. All those in favor? Number one, that council endorse four-laning Latoria Road option, expanding Latoria Road from Machosen to VMP, complete with intersection upgrades and signalization as required. I have 3, 4. I will be opposed. And I'm very disappointed in that. I don't feel we have enough information on the services that are available or necessary or provided by the environment in that area. We need to look pretty carefully at what is going on. The proposed developments of those 8 to 10 lots. I don't know how they will put foundations in. I'll be very blunt about that. Taylor.
Sorry, I just think that vote for me is maybe premature because I'm in my mind it's Latoria and Veterans or it's Machosen being done completely, and so I could certainly oppose Latoria in light of Machosen being done, but we can't do nothing on either of them, and so I don't know how we address that, but.
Yeah,
I'd like to, move to have Machosen four lanes all the way down on there, and we can reconsider that. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yes, sorry. Can you use your mic if you'd like to make a comment? I'll go to Kim and then I'll go to Dawn.
Sorry, I was just clarifying that it's not one or the other. It's, we have 3 lanes we have to, or 3 roads we're talking about here. Veterans Memorial has not been 4-laned yet. And I believe that's like 8 years out, or that was the projection. And Machosen or Latoria, I don't even know when this is supposed to start. If we pick one and when it's supposed to start. But I guess with Machosen, I guess just because it's gonna take longer, or maybe because it may cost more money, which really hasn't been proven. That it, just because of that doesn't mean it's the better selection. It doesn't mean it's the better way to go. Um, there's lots to think about, and I think when you think about the way a driver drives, like, I guess I gave the analogy earlier that if I was coming from Duke Road in Machosen, turned onto Machosen Road, and I was going downtown, for example, or even over to the Langford side, am I going to go down Machosen Road and turn left onto Latoria Road to go down VNP? Or am I just gonna go straight down Machosen Road? Like, it doesn't seem logical to me. Um, that's where I don't understand it. And I don't understand why we would invest in the money to 4-lane Latoria when we know um, our partner, or like the city of Langford across the way, isn't going to 4-lane theirs. And they're presenting the traffic issues as well with having the new school and all the development that's over there. So I just feel like it's a mute case. Like, why would we do that? So um, I'm just wondering if we can't really say just no to that. You're like, Taylor's right. We have to come up with, if we say no to that, we have to do something. So I don't know what that something is. And I guess I'm looking to staff to say which one comes first. Is it Latoria or Machosen and then VMP? Are we doing this all together? What is the plan? I don't understand.
Thank you. That is a bit of a chicken and egg question. I mean, we really won't know which comes first until we decide what we think we might want to do for a scope of works. And then even once we come up with the scope of works that we think we might do, that will evolve. Like, when Royal Roads starts developing, they could really throw, a different plan in here. What's a positive thing is the model truly is a living document that we can work with and massage. And literally today we could say, let's not 4-lane Latoria and 4-lane Machosen, and then something unexpected, significantly different, 5, 7 years now could lead us to say, okay, let's stop doing some of these pieces that we were going to do on Machosen, and let's pivot over to VMP, or let's pivot down to Latoria and make these changes, because we'll have the ability to make those changes because of the model. So the decisions you're making today really are just about globally, what do we think the best first step forward is? And then we'll start digging into those steps and going, okay, is it making sense? Like, you're right about the estimates are massively wide, right? When we actually get into looking into some of these corridors, they might be cheaper. But we won't know that until we kind of get a path, and we'll know where A is and we know where B is, but our path to get between the two could vary wildly along the way. But at least we're putting together the tools, and we'll inform it with traffic counts and all those other things. So the decision you're making tonight is not a path that we're going to linearly go down and figure out. And development will be a big piece, because back to the funding issue, it's a lot of dollars. So depending on where development occurs, like if all of a sudden Machosen properties started getting bought up and we were starting to see a lot of development growth like we have in the last couple of years on Souk, then that would make us very quickly pivot to, let's get some work done on Machosen, because we've got people paying for that. So it doesn't have to be a finite decision. It just kind of has to be a philosophical direction of which way we'd like to go.
I think,
I'm not sure if that helps very much.
yeah, I think, John, like, as soon as as soon as it's signaled that there's going to be more lanes on Machosen Road, I think you'll see people's houses go up for sale. I mean, that's just a typical reaction, just the same as along Souk Road. I guess I would have it hard to understand that they wouldn't think that that one day would be like a busier road. Um, but is there an option, or does it make any sense to move right to VMP and start doing that? I mean, it's there, it's ready to go. I don't know.
If you made me pick, I'd pick that Souk Road piece between VMP and Machosen. That definitely is our major objective. Now, if you want to think about ease of construction, VMP is probably the easiest piece to do. There's not a lot of houses in the way. I mean, it's high volume of traffic. We've got the right of way. So, it's going to get pretty high on a list of priorities of where you want to go when you look at a matrix. But if you wanted to get your biggest bang for your buck, I would probably start at that Souk piece. And all scenarios have that Souk piece. So that's what I'm saying. Like moving down the path in the next, say, 10 years less, we probably won't get to like some of these big, oh, which way should we go questions, because we probably have other, like Carindale intersection, we'll start building next year. That's a $2 million project probably. So that's going to take up a lot of our funds for a while. So we won't do another big project for 2 or 3 years. In the meantime, we'll get some more direction because we'll have some more development. We can look at the model. We can do some pivoting. We've just put it on a piece of paper what that construction plan is. We haven't actually built them, so we can pivot along the way. So we are going to be pretty malleable with regards to how we do this because we're going to have the tool in place to allow us to manipulate areas we go. And again, we can put together a program of traffic counts and so on to validate what we're doing and what we're assuming. And we are kind of starting a little blind because we're just getting into the process, but it will get better and better as we move down the path.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious if that's why this report tonight didn't ask for any particular recommendations to council.
100%. Like they're truly, I am, when you made the recommendation, I probably should have got up and suggested that you didn't, but I didn't want to stifle the conversation. Council has a lot to put in place. The public still has a lot to have decisions on. When we first did the meeting tonight, it was with regards to try to give you as much information we can. So moving forward, you'll be better informed to make decisions. And keep in mind, and the workshop idea, we are going to do those types of things with the public and the committees moving forward. And then once all of that's done, it will come back to this committee. You'll have a lot more information to make some decisions and perhaps some confidence with regards to the recommendations you might want to make to council. And that's when you could do that. So now, unfortunately, that's not tomorrow. That's 9 months, 12 months away. But that is what we see this getting to.
Sure. So I'm just wondering, are you hoping by educating this committee that we will help you with educating the public about what our choices are?
I certainly think that's one of the roles you'll play with regards to the TMP stakeholder process for sure.
Thank you. Taylor.
Yeah, just on top of the education piece, I'm just thinking, wouldn't it make sense, because we're getting this information now, that maybe there is a council endorsed idea out there while we start that consultation, right? Maybe just to help focus people, or say, hey, the people who have actually sat down and heard the detailed information think this, therefore maybe I can focus on that. But going back to the point on VMP, it sounds like the easy option and the option that we have a lot of time on. We have the right of way, there's no houses. Seems like not the one that we need to focus on now or jump to do now. I think we maybe need to put our attention to doing the hardest thing and the thing that we all know needs to be done, which has been chosen, because all the houses are going down to the beachlands and Royal Bay. And as we already said, are you going to go left on Latoria and then down VMP and then down on Souk? No, you're going to go down Machosen. So the reality is, again, back to, if we're endorsing one or the other, I'm going towards the route of let's put our eggs in Machosen and get on with it. We skip the headache and heartache with Latoria, and we do that cognizant that we are passing a significant opportunity, which is that area is being developed right now, and there's an opportunity to piggyback on that. But we do that with the mindset of we're committing to what truly needs to be done, which I'm sitting here constantly going, it's Machosen, it's Machosen, it's Machosen. So.
Roger.
John, I totally agree with what you said on Souk Road from Veterans Memorial to Machosen Road. Thank you.
Yeah.
So why isn't that on here? That's my question. It is a bottleneck. and it should be addressed.
It is on there. It's on every scenario that is going to happen. There's a few key things that are on there, no matter what, with every scenario. One is the 4-laning of Metchosin from Souk to Metchosin, or from Metchosin from Wishart to Souk. And also the piece from on Souk from VMP to Metchosin. No matter what scenario you pick, both of those areas are required to be done.
Okay.
So it is on there.
Okay, thank you. And to further reiterate what Kim said, I totally agree. We're going to ask people to go up Latoria, to get onto Veterans Memorial, to drive out to the Island Highway, to go into town to work. I've done all the readings, timings, mileage and everything, and it works out that it's 3.1 kilometers longer to go that way than it is to go out Metchosin Road to Souk Road to the Old Island Highway, out to the Island Highway. And over the course of the year, I don't hold me to the numbers, but it was like 1,100 liters of gas based on a car consuming 10 liters per 100 kilometers. And the person will be in their car in a year, if they're working, 73.5 hours longer by choosing that route over the route I just told you about. People are not dumb, and they will go like water, the path of least resistance, the fastest and the quickest and the cheapest. So I'm starting to wonder if we shouldn't be focusing on the Chosen Road over Latoria and Veterans Memorial, because I speak to lots of people and people say if they're nuts if they think I'm going to drive this way when I can go this way. And besides, when they go Metchosin, they can zip down Lagoon and go out Ocean Boulevard. So they have 2 routes to go and faster. So I don't know. I just throw that out there because I think Kim is right on that point.
Thank you. Taylor.
Yeah, I'll just build on that and not only agree, but going and doing Metchosin alleviates a lot of the pressure on that Souk Road between Veterans and Metchosin, right? It doesn't force people up that way. It actually would take people away from that spot. So that's kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
And Madam Secretary, I feel like I've done a bad job as chair with this motion because we've had discussion, we took a vote, and now it looks to me, and I could be wrong, that committee feels differently now. So I think I've done a bad job. Can I fix it? And committee, do you agree with me? Am I saying what you're seeing too? I just want to be sure. Kim? Oh, sorry. Bad.
Yeah, I agree that we had a motion on the floor and we already took that vote. But I think that there's nothing stopping us from adding another yeah, well, I guess, yeah, now I'm thinking.
No, we have to
I was gonna
fix
say,
ourselves here.
We have to fix it first before we can add something else, I guess.
I know. I'm just waiting for our staff assistants.
Madam Chair, I am just reading our council procedure bylaws for amendments to motions. And I'm just trying to figure which one would best fit the situation here. Was it the intention to withdraw this motion or to amend it?
Well, let's hear from Stuart and then maybe I'll know.
I mean, I agree with you. It seems like there is support for Metchosin, whether that means no 4-laning Latoria or not. The committee can decide that. I also hear everybody's sort of empirical thing. People are going to go this way, not that way. You know, we've got Dan, traffic consultant, who's done the numbers. We've done studies at Royal Bay and Beachlands and Olympic View forever and ever and ever, all predicated. I mean, frankly, Veterans was built to access developments in South Colwood. To sort of go, yeah, but I think I'm gonna go the other way when the traffic models seem to support this as being a viable option. Frankly, it's taking the chosen route and I did put this as one motion because I do think they're interrelated and it sounds, you know, that breaking them up complicates matters, but perhaps gets more to what the committee wants, which is what we should be trying to do. But I just don't see Machosen as being the solution. Again, after 30 years of study and looking at it, I don't think that's ever been considered to be the main route out of South Colwood. I understand, you know, I live in that area. I know which way I go. But I have to have some faith in the modeling that's been done over and over and over again to say that there will be something. And, you know, Roger, I think he nails it. He says, you know, people are going to go whichever way is easiest. And if they're going to go this way and it's that shorter, they're going to save this much gas and that much time. Yes, they are. This is what we talk about, the water flow model. People will do that. But if it doesn't, if it's quicker to go up Victoria with less driveways and Veterans with less driveways and get to the highway, and they find that's a more convenient route, then they'll go that way. That's just what naturally. And again, I have to believe that these traffic models weren't just pulled out of the air. They've been studied and created. And if they're telling me that this is the split of traffic based on these conditions, I ain't gonna stand up and say it's perfect, but I'm gonna say it's a pretty good guide that we should pay attention to. So we are looking at, basically, in my mind, a choice between saying the traffic should go up Latoria and VMP versus the traffic should go up Machosen. I frankly, I look at that list of things on Machosen, on the number of properties involved. Yes, some of them will develop and it'll take some length of time. And that's why I tried to put that in there, is that maybe, you know, 20 years from now, it'll become feasible. There'll be less driveways or people will want to develop. Maybe at that point, there's enough land in Colwood to develop for a long, long time, probably well beyond even the models that we're looking at. So let's try to set it up. And I just don't see Machosen. So that's why I wrote the motion the way I did. If council committee doesn't agree with me, committee doesn't agree with me. I've lived with that before, I'll live with it again. But that's, I think, the appropriate way to go.
And I agree. Stuart, I always said that I would stand by what we were told, and like, I don't want to be making the decision for everybody. I want to base it on scientific data. And I did sit in a model simulation, traffic simulation workshop, and we saw it, and we saw that Machosen was the way to go. And then the next time we met, it wasn't. It was, we were being told something different, not showing it, but being told something different. So I don't have faith in what was presented to us because we saw it with our own eyes that the simulation showed that going Machosen and VMP were the roads to tackle. So I'm not sure when it changed, but it didn't change visually for us to actually see another simulation to show that this works. So I just don't have faith in that. And that's why I'm suggesting it go the other way. But I do want to be able to say we're doing what we're doing because that's the scientific way. So maybe we need to go back to the modeling and see the simulation again. And I think it would be great for the committee too as well.
John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did a quick search on your motion. Because it was in the affirmative of the motion you do, which basically says the majority agreed to that motion. If in such another vote you decided to rescind that motion in favor of another motion because it was passed, you could do so.
Great, thank you. So I guess I'm going to ask the committee what you would like. I think we're kind of deciding how many. I think that it's not terribly important that we provide direction because that was not expected of us this evening. What appears to be before us is no particular recommendations going to council from this committee. And a member of our committee brought motions thinking that, and I understand, I concur that we should be informing council if we can as to options that they should endorse. Would you like to rescind the motion that we passed to endorse four-laning Latoria and provide a different motion, or would you like to let it stand? So I'm just asking, all in favor of rescinding the motion? Maybe that's the easiest way. Yeah. Okay. So I will move that we rescind the motion. All in favor? That is carried. Opposed? Stuart is opposed. He still believes in four-laning Latoria. I think that what we're trying to do is provide some direction to council. Now, before we had a traffic model and before we had VMP, we talked about improving Machosen Road. We eventually stepped back from that because it seemed like we were never going to find a solution to four-laning Machosen Road. It was in the OCP in 2005. It was in, it was what we thought we needed to do. Particularly that section between Souk Road and Wishart. I think we can see when we look at the presentation, every single scenario that they have modeled for us shows a need to improve Souk Road between VMP and Machosen Road. So that area that's 2 lanes currently between VMP and Machosen Road is a major bottleneck. And we all can see that we need to improve that area. And then all of these scenarios also assume four-laning Machosen Road from Souk Road to Wishart. Well, or shall we say widening Machosen Road. So some of the scenarios are 3 lanes. We need to look at transit options for some of that as well. And there's some pretty challenging areas. I'm not going to be able to think of the name of the road, but right before you turn into the merge lane onto Machosen Road, there's another little road, Langholm, not Langholm. Maybe it is Langholm. Anyways, another road right there that is very problematic. So there's going to be many problem areas. We're going to have to work to finding a solution. That is more specific modeling than what we're doing today. We're trying to identify long-term goals to meet the needs of growth in the community. I'm just done. That's excellent. I've got to stop talking for a minute. My
Thanks,
brain.
Chair. In reflecting upon the conversation we've had here and some of the information, which we really do thank you for, it's been a great amount of information. It really, in my opinion, it really comes down to there's not really enough information for all the different scenarios that could play out with where we are today. To John's point earlier, we're sort of at the beginning of this. There's several different sections that are being at play with that we're working on here. We're VMP from the initial work, possibly a circle there, roundabout there with the province. There is the work on every scenario for those two, which everybody has already said. So if you're looking at something to submit back to council, the possibility might be to look at, we've seen both of those roads need improvements right at the beginning. So if there is the ability to prioritize some of that investigation, looking at those 2 pieces of road, the Machosen from Wishart to Souk, and from on Souk Road, Veterans Memorial to Machosen, with the influence of a potential roundabout coming into on Veterans Memorial, Because a lot of that traffic is not Colwood traffic. Like there's a lot of feeders, a majority of the traffic is not Colwood traffic. So there's other influences coming into that main corridor. So if you're gonna look at prioritizing some of that investigation along with the transportation management plan and looking at some other multimodal transportation capabilities, when you're looking at submitting some dollars or submitting some focus, we really do have an option to look for more investigation, look for more information before there's really something that makes really concrete sense in working through some of this. Like I say, at this point, I don't know what to put back to as far as what we've been saying, aside from thank you very much for some amazing amount of information. But when you look at all of those possibilities and all the different scenarios, every one makes sense. It's just a matter of which one can prioritize through funding, through other impacts and other influences coming into that scenario. And some of the other situations that are some of the other growth plans that are currently in place and the speed of growth. Like it feels to me like there's way too many variables to start looking at one particular set of recommendations versus another. It almost needs a little more time. And then you get back into that paralysis of analysis, right? You're at that critical point. I don't think I added any value there, but I think
It's a hard problem.
That's what I'm thinking right now. It seems like there's way too much information without enough concrete details in place to really think of something aside from those two pieces. They have to be done. Great. Prioritize those first and then continue working on more investigation on the rest of it.
Well, thank you for that, Don. I'll shift over to Roger.
I'm a bit confused. And it doesn't take much, I realize. But again, I'm reiterating what John said. Right now, the major traffic jam is on Souk Road between Veterans Memorial and the Chosen Road. I don't know if it's land acquisition you need. I don't know why, because that is a specific project. I know it's going to be tied into a roundabout, but I think a lot of the preliminary work could be done ahead of time to alleviate some of the traffic congestion there. I think we have to address the needs first, not what we would like. Where is the congestion? How can we help people to move easier on an arterial route? And if that's one, I think it should be listed by itself up there. And if you want to tie it in later with the roundabout, so be it. But it should be addressed. It should be estimated. And we could say, that's the one you do first. I mean, you don't go and start building bridges over rivers, you know, when there's a bridge that needs to be redone because it's broken down or, you know, can't handle the volume. You would tackle that bridge first. And I think John has said that is the major congestion. Maybe that's what we should be doing first. I don't know.
Hey, Taylor.
Yeah, just building on, I think Don's point, I think, and what was previously said, I think there's kind of three things that I want to leave tonight with actually giving something to council and doing something. I think we have a tendency to maybe be overcome by events, right? We've talked about sustainable infrastructure and when are we going to schedule that? So are we ever going to come back to this? Who knows? But I think there's probably three things that are very easy to say, let's get on with it. And there's three things that I think are probably pretty agreeable for everybody. But one is Souk between Veterans and Chosen. I think that's easy. Let's just get on with it. We've talked about Sangster being in the right of way. Let's go on with figuring that out and having a response from them. So re-engage with them. It was also mentioned the extended playground zone that exists on the Chosen, where we're reduced to 30 for who knows what reason at the Royal Bay End there. So let's figure that out. Those are three very easy things that will actually have some impact moving forward and are tangible for council to work with. The other three things that I had in mind, maybe a little bit requires a little bit more, but Chosen widening, Souk to Wishart, I think we're all pretty much agreeable on that. But you know, maybe not an immediate thing. I really did like Stuart's motion with respect to any rezoning that goes on along with Chosen. Making sure that we're getting a sufficient right of way, that we're talking about limiting or removing access on Chosen. That's just a simple thing that's in place now that future proofs the fact that Chosen will probably need to be done. And I think it's very easy to say that, as Don said, we need more info. And I think one of the big pieces that we maybe need more info on is the Latoria piece and the challenges of building there, the environmental impacts and that sort of thing. So I don't necessarily need more info on what widening veterans would do or what widening Chosen would do. I'm pretty clear on those things. What I would be interested in though is more information on how challenging it would be to deal with Latoria and what those impacts would be. So I don't know if that transforms into anything, but I think again, there are three things there that we could put to motion and actually pass to council to have something with, and maybe three things that we want to talk about or debate or add on to those initial three, or leave it as it is tonight. But I do want to walk away with something going to council and us having something completed.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Stuart.
So I spent a career as a civil engineer and, you know, especially as a young buck, I was really sort of focused, you know, you give me a job and I'd design the hell out of it and I'd get it built and watch the budget, and I was really proud of it. And as I got a few gray hairs and got a little older, I realized that, you know, I got the easy part, you know, and it's kind of what we're doing here tonight. We're sort of dumbing it down. We're focusing on, well, you know, there's a project here that we understand and we can do. And here's the, you know, this is important. We need to do that. But we were started the evening with the sort of the traffic model, sort of like a 50,000 foot thing. And we're not dealing with 50,000 foot thing. We're down to the, you know, 5 foot thing. And the problems that I saw in my career were, if you didn't get it right at the top, it didn't matter what you did at the bottom, you know, it just wasn't going to work out. So I'd like to bring the conversation back to, you know, the major routes out of South Colwood, which is essentially what we talked about. Is it Chosen? Is it BMP? Is it Latoria? If we don't build Latoria, do we need to build BMP? You know, even though, as John says, BMP is a pretty easy project. You know, it's don't have driveways, don't have trees. It was sort of set up to be 4-lane when it was built. So if that's, you know, if we're not going to do Latoria, that's a good question to ask. You know, I don't know. So let's not get down to, should it be a roundabout or an intersection here or there? Let's say, what do we think the main traffic route should be and why? And I sort of had my thoughts on what it should be. It doesn't sound like I'm maybe in agreement with the majority of the committee. As I said, I've lost lots of votes, I'll lose more. But I think rather than grasping what was easy and you know, the low hanging fruit, I still think we need to, you know, the role tonight should be to look at the big picture and the higher level stuff. So that's all.
Thanks, Stuart. Kim.
Thanks, Stuart. I don't think it's about what we want it to be. I think it's about what scientifically is being shown to us. So I think it's really important that this committee see that traffic model simulation in action, and even council again, because like I said, we were showing it, and it showed that it was chosen and VMP were the right routes to go. And that's what we based it on. And then later on, when we had another workshop, we were just told that that wasn't the way anymore. So I never actually saw another simulation to discount or that way we were first shown. So I think it's important to see the simulation, because I don't think any one of us want to be just making a decision on what road we think. I think we need to base it on something, and certainly the taxpayers are owed that. So I just, maybe that big part for now is not something, because I think council even would like to see this again. I think it's still you know, not everybody's on board with a clear path with council. So that might just be one of the situations that we could suggest. And then the rest of it, I mean, we can go through each of the points still and suggest some things, like even things that Taylor mentioned. So the things that we know that we need to do.
Okay, Dawn.
I agree with what Stuart's saying as well from the 50,000 foot level. I don't think there's any disagreement that there's only a certain number of routes out of the most highly active area of development in Colwood right now, and an increasing traffic problem or transportation problem. Honestly, don't think that is in debate in the fact that there's only 3 ways out. Or 3 roads from that area out, unless you really want to go around out of your way. And so to the point of water running, they're not going to go that way. So I don't think there's a debate on making sure that continue to investigate the best path forward for each one of those, because there are going to have to be improvements on every one of those. It's a matter of saying, yes, that is agreed and understood. The actual improvements and what those might be, there's not necessarily enough information to really start getting down into specific. I mean, you have Class D estimates right there. And I've never seen a Class D estimate come in at the lower end in anything I've ever done in my engineering career. So there's going to be cost in all of this, absolutely. I think my point earlier was there are some things that we know we have to do. Great, like to Taylor's point, get on with them. There isn't really a discussion. Put them in the queue and keep going and have more conversation and more input from the rest of the city on the 3 modes of transportation avenues or corridors that we have going out here. There are only 3. So unless we start building new roads, I don't think there's going to be a new corridor. There's not going to be any increase in that. So really positioning back to council is, for me, would be to agree with Taylor to say there are some things that can be done immediately. Makes sense. Continue to investigate those and start getting some more estimates and some detailed information on what that's required. But also, to the same point, continue with the traffic, the traffic modeling and sorry, sick last week, it's still not over. And the traffic plan, the transportation plan in the future is going to evolve as more of these go forward. It's not say do nothing, it's continue with what's already been placed. There was some specific recommendations that we go to say, look at this and look at the 2 different avenues. Those are the 2 main corridors going from South Colwood up. There's no disagreement that they have to have more investigation for sure. To prioritize one over the other, that will come with some more investigation on what the modeling looks like and what some of the other inputs come into in the near future. We're not doing next year's plan, we're doing several years out. So there's a lot of things that can be influencing that on the way through. And so if we're going to position something to council as.
So what I got out of that, maybe I can just recap where we've got to. Was Taylor mentioned there are some things that we've discussed tonight that we could recommend to council for priority consideration. First being Souk Road BMP to Machosen. Second being Sangster school parking off our road right away on Machosen Road, working towards that. Removal of our extended school zone, covering from Sangster to the end of the sport courts at the back of Dunsmuir School. And consider Machosen Road from Souk to Wishart for acquisitions, planning, development, like to get on with making a plan for getting that done. And then consider continuing with the traffic model and continue to re-look at the 50,000-foot model, which definitely includes improvements on Veterans Memorial Parkway, which we're not going to say exactly what they are. We know that next year we're getting a new intersection at Carindale. We know that we will be monitoring to look at where congestion becomes problematic. All of our models also show the connector in the Allendale pit area between Machosen Road and VMP Road as an important connection. So to develop those plans. Did I miss anything? So could I make that motion on the committee's behalf? Roger?
Recommending looking at 3-lane chosen road from student road to employee.
Okay. And traffic simulation. The presentation, you mean?
So I think we came to interesting recommendations. Adding on Taylor's additional.
Yeah. John?
I'm just nervous that I cannot imagine they were able to capture that motion.
I kind of have it.
Okay. You're definitely gonna need to give them some time or be a lot slower. There's,
Well, for sure. I've got it written down here because I scribble while I'm talking. So I have Souk Road VMP to Machosen, Sangster off the right of way. I can just show you my notes after. It's written down here. You can probably follow my chicken scratch. Sangster off the right of way for the road, extended school zone off, meaning from Sangster to yeah, it is playground zone. Well, they were considered that the soccer fields were similar to a playground at the back of Sangster. That's where that came from. Souk to Wishart, working towards a plan for 4-laning that. And rezoning, yeah. The little road, it's in all 4 simulations where the committee is saying we see that road and its purpose. Yeah. It's maybe has a different name than Allendale, but it's the connection already exists, but it's to connect like a Y to Machosen. And then that we want to see the traffic model in operation. And have a traffic simulation presentation to the committee. Oh, right, and Machosen. And I don't find that surprising because that is something that I've heard talked about a lot. Every time we talk about it, we talk about, well, does it mean 4 lanes? Does that mean 3 lanes? There's lots of refinement, but I think in general, the direction from this committee is to council is that here are some 3 quick wins that Taylor gave us. Here is things that we agree need to happen because they're in all the scenarios, which is the Souk to from a chosen road from Souk Road to Wishart Road being widened. And trying to eliminate additional accesses. So widened, I think Stuart's motion had better wording than I'm providing here in terms of width, but that we be sure to acquire additional road right-of-way widths as it becomes available. And see the traffic model again and look at a plan to widen Machosen Road to 3 lanes for the full amount. I think there's more that we need to do, but that's a very good long laundry list. sorry, what was the word? More focused? Okay, sorry, Stuart, go ahead.
Okay, well, actually Taylor helped me out because I wasn't, if Machosen Road is going to be a 4-lane, I don't want to spend a lot of time and effort making it 3-lane. So I was concerned about that part. Taylor said more focused analysis of 3 or 4 lanes. I can support that. So that's good. I'm not sure about the school, the playground zone on Machosen, whether that needs to be shortened or not. Kind of course, like everybody, when it first came in, I didn't like it, but I'm used to it now. And there are schools, there are a lot going on in there. There's that mid-block crosswalk. I'm not sure I support that one. The rest of them, yeah, they make sense. It may not be the, yeah. So that's my concern. I don't know if I'll vote against the whole motion because of it, but we'll see.
Okay, Taylor.
For the wording for that playground zone, I maybe just council should have staff investigate the 30-kilometer-hour playground zone on Machosen Road with the intent to remove it if deemed appropriate.
Okay, sorry. Writing,
We can go
Sure.
back, we can go back in council minutes and we can see why that actually was done on Michelson Road with the playground. And see why Mr. Baxter said it was to be like that. And it was really to alleviate the upset from the, to make it safer for the kids, I guess. But, parents, people were upset about the road being fast and that was a way to alleviate it. And it's, try getting a ticket in that zone though, because it's very confusing where it stops and where it ends. And if it's a playground or if it's a school zone, and it's so long that it doesn't seem like it should be that long. And I know people that have received tickets in that zone because it's just confusing. So I just want to say that, but we could take it out, we can leave it in, just investigating it the way Taylor said is great.
okay. So just to recap, I have Souk Road, BMP to Machosen as a priority. Sangster off the Machosen Road right of way, please and thank you, or work towards that. Extended school zone investigated by staff to see if we could potentially shorten or eliminate that. Souk to from Souk Road to Wishart Road, Machosen be investigated for widening and ASAP as possible. Number 5 is zoning with increased right-of-ways on Machosen and eliminate accesses where possible. And number 6 was see the traffic model again and choose a direction for the future. Keep that 50,000 foot view in mind. Number 7, have traffic simulation presentation again. And number 8, Machosen Road widening to 3 lanes or 4 lane scenario options. And number 9, more focused investigation on Latoria challenges. Sorry, I lost you there, but number 10, Allendale connection to, that's to Machosen. And Wishart. It is already connected to Wishart. Allendale. It's maybe you can't go all the way through, but Roger.
Just a point. I don't know if we have to do the study for Machosen for 4 lanes. They've already done it. So now let's do the 3 and then we can compare. There's no point in doing the 3 and 4 again. 4's been done. Let's do the 3.
Question to staff, have we done a 4-lane investigation of Benchosa? Just on the traffic model, we haven't looked at what that means or.
We did have an in-depth study that we brought to council. Would that be the spring of 23? Yeah, and at that time, council decided to put that on hold. So we do have a significant amount of information, but that is just for that north piece from Wishart to Souk. We haven't done any study work from Wishart back to Latoria.
Right, okay, so that's what our recommendation is looking at all the way down to Latoria, because we do have information on Souk to Wishart on Machosen.
That's correct.
Yeah. And that, is that 3 lanes or is that 4 lanes?
That's how we determine it's likely going to be 4 lanes. But in that scenario, I think we're at 3, but the model showed us that 4 would be needed.
Yeah, granted, going back a year and a half, 2 years, but what I recall was it was a 4-lane scenario that was considered for the 800 meters or so between Souk and Wishart, and it really was a reflection of the need for storage leading up to those intersections as vehicles wait to make those movements. So it was one of these things as the storage length requirements grew back, we found ourselves in a scenario where we were essentially at 4 lanes anyhow, and that's where that landed.
Yeah, because it becomes really problematic at the intersection when there's a lot of people wanting to go left to VMP, which is the importance of that other connector piece to Allendale. Roger.
Dan, when you did that study, was the roundabout going to be considered, or was it lights? Because that would make a big difference. You would need the storage if you had a roundabout.
So you mean roundabout at Souk and Machosen?
Machosen.
We did some testing on both. Yeah, whether it was a signal with added laning or a roundabout with the 2 full lanes through on Souk as well.
And you needed that much storage?
Yeah, there was a fair bit of storage needed. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I have our laundry list, and I don't know if this is a good place to start. Let me say it that way. I don't feel that we're not doing a nuts and bolts evaluation. We know that things are going to move and change, both with changes in how we perceive our traffic through the traffic model, but also in how constrained we are in what land we may have to work with. But at least we have taken what we've heard and provided some feedback to council with what this committee feels is important considerations for making traffic work better within South Colwood. So I will work with staff to provide this. When I get a final version, I will try to send that back out to committee so that if I got something quite wrong, you can correct me on the fly to make sure that we get it right. So I have, I think, have I gone through it enough times for everybody to be comfortable with that? That you can provide input back to me once we have this all firmed up to make sure that we didn't miss something, and it won't be licensed to open up new things, but I'm just trying to capture the essence of our takeaways and the important contribution that you will provide by coming here tonight to provide input on what we're trying to do, to pass that back up to council. Here's what the committee sees in this. I think that's helpful. Does that work for everyone? All right, excellent. Calling the question, all in favor of our 10 points of recommendations? Is anyone opposed? No one is opposed. We've workshopped this to death here. So we have these recommendations. I will share them with staff. Our next item on our agenda is just to discuss where we're at with the sustainable infrastructure plan, because we didn't want to see that slip off of our work table here. I just wonder, is there a planned spot where that comes back to us?
I'll have to check with Ms. Hepting. That was a finance initiative with regards to that program, and we weren't aware that was going to be on the agenda tonight. So we'll have to have a chat with Ms. Hepting next meeting. We'll get back to you with regards to when that's going to come
Perfect.
before the committee.
Thank you. And the next thing that I had added to the agenda as 5.3 was the date for looking at our transportation master plan. Looking at the calendar for council, the next available dates are either November 13th or November 14th. Neither of those nights have a service review on them or another committee meeting. Does that work for everyone? Taylor?
I was just thinking, is there anything on our 10-point list that we might want done before that? Maybe even just the traffic model, not all the detail back. Just for discussion, if that helps kind of inform or round out some final thoughts.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of lost. What is this for? This from our 10 points? Oh, well, I would hope that we will try to have a traffic model presentation. Is that possible, Dan, to do that sometime soon, to present the traffic model, show them how it runs? Okay, perfect. And then, so November 13th or 14th, is there anybody can't make those dates? I can check with staff. We'll send out an email as well. I just wanted to test the waters, and then I will give staff and help you to have all this. So the next thing I'm looking for is an adjournment at 9:30 at night. Moved by Dawn. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks.